Good evening, everyone. May I have your attention, please? Out of respect for the proceedings and in consideration for others in the audience, we ask that you please silence your cell phones or any sound emitting devices. If you wish to speak on today's agenda items, please make sure that you fill out our slips forms that are located here at the front and turn it in to us. It must be turned in prior to the agenda item being called. And we're ready to start.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the San Diego County Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board meeting of May 7th, 2026. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll? She's absent.
Vice Chairman.
Present.
Secretary DeCano, President, position.
Present.
Dr. Brown.
Present.
Mr. Google.
Present.
Ms. Frederica Mondragon. Present. Mr. Moody.
Present.
Dr. Brown. Mr. Ware. Mr. Wilson.
Present.
Okay, let the record reflect there is a response.
Thank you. And we do not have anybody seeking just cause or any other emergency considerations. So at this point in time, since we don't have a motion to participate remotely, we're ready to go into the public comment section. This section is for non-agenda items that are within the jurisdiction of CLERB. And Madam Moderator, how many speaker requests do we have?
We have about 25 requests to speak.
All right, we will allow 2 minutes allotted per speaker. Madam Moderator, would you go ahead and call the speakers in order?
First, we will start with Paloma Serna.
My name is Paloma Serna. I'm the mother of Elisa Serna, who died in custody in November 11, 2019, by medical neglect from the San Diego County Sheriff and their medical staff. I'm also with Saving Lives in Custody California and North County Equity and Justice Coalition Saving Lives in Custody campaign. So this new independent study confirms that families have been saying for years that people are not just dying in San Diego County jail, they are dying from preventable deaths. According to this report, more than half of the deaths are not natural. They are overdoses, suicides, and homicide. That means that these are these are failures. Even more alarming, 85% of people who have died have not even been sentenced, like my daughter, who was only in custody for 5 days. And many of these deaths are happening within the first days, sometimes just right after booking. That tells us exactly that the system is breaking at intake, at medical screening, and the most critical moment when someone's life could have been saved. This report also shows that deaths are concentrated in specific facilities, especially in San Diego Central Jail, where the risk of dying is significantly higher than anywhere else. So this is not just random. This is a pattern, and patterns mean accountability. And here's in the same reported document that critical data also was delayed and denied by the San Diego Sheriff Office. Also too, at the same time that this report was released, the public is now learning about another disturbing lawsuit involving allegation that a man was raped while in San Diego County Jail custody and repeatedly ignored when he asked for help. This is not just about death anymore. This is about an overall safety, dignity, and human rights for every person inside this facility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cerna. Before we call the next speaker, I'd like to remind everybody in accordance with the agenda that we're on item 3, which is public comment for anything that's not an item on tonight's open session agenda. However, the study that you referenced is on the open session agenda. So I respectfully request we keep these initial public comments to non-agenda items. Let's proceed.
Next, we will call.
Before you do that, and I note that Dr. Thomas has now shown up at 5:37.
Next, we will call David Settles.
Hello, clerk. My name is David Settles. I'm the brother of Matthew Settles, who had schizophrenia. He died at George Bailey Jail in August of 2022. I'm here representing my brother, also Saving Lives in Custody and the North County Equity and Justice Campaign. You know, I did want to just say, in general, thank you, clerk, for, I don't want to dive deep, but, you know, when Matthew first died, you know, doing this type of study was, I think that sheriff challenged it for not having the clerk not having jurisdiction. So anyway, I want to applaud that, you know, this was conducted and that, you know, the clerk fought for it. That's important. My brother would be very proud to know that his death is not totally in vain, that there's, you know, we're addressing some of these systematic issues and looking at those. That's how my brother was. When he was in the county mental hospital, when he was in boarding homes, he was always giving suggestions, how they could improve things, what they should change on their menu, how they could pick up trash. So he would be honored to know this. And there's also just one last touching, I think this is, you know, kind of a very meaningful special to Matthew and myself about this report and that he had an effect on this. In that I think I've talked about Matthew. One of the things that he and I bonded was we were in college in the 80s, 90s. He was big into hiking. He loved nature. We climbed a lot of mountains through the Sierras. One time he and I in college, on a whim, to know a little bit about Matthew, we traversed, just he and I alone, across the Sierras from west to east, not on a trail, over the high mountains. And for some of you may not know, but back then, the cutting edge, just to close that, was the stove we used was cutting edge for hiking, was a Mountain Whisper Light stove. So this has a lot of meaning for me. So thank you, clerk, for all you do. I want to apologize ahead of time. I'm not going to stay for the entire meeting because I have to get to the Padres game, but I don't know about the
Thank you.
Got this, thank you, sir.
Next, we will call Darwin Fishman.
Good evening, Darwin Fishman, he, him, his. I'm with the Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego. And I want to come to thank you for your work that you've done. And I know some of it is on the agenda tonight. The one I just want to specifically highlight is Bobby Ray Patton and your decision to not just sustain charges, but refer to the district attorney. And it's just extraordinary, the work that you've done on this and that it's unprecedented, that this hasn't been done before or that it's not more common. And just the part about criminal negligence, I'll just read this. A person acts with criminal negligence when he or she acts in a reckless way that creates a high risk of death or great bodily injury. And a reasonable person would have known that acting in that way would create such a risk. It's amazing that if you think about it in terms of that standard, if you guys had used that standard consistently over the years, how many lives could have been saved? Because now that you are abiding by it and you're using that standard and sending that message to the sheriff's department, I have no doubt that the behavior and actions will begin to change in the deep-seated culture that's allowed so many people to die and why you have so many impacted family members coming here every month will begin to change. It's by your actions, as the state audit has shown, that you're setting the precedent. If there's not oversight from the district attorney, it does fall on you guys to figure out the criminal negligence. And we already know that the only other way that's been worked out is through lawsuits. And that's a horrible way to figure out justice for families and for a society where you have to have multi-million-dollar lawsuits before you change policy and take these issues seriously. So thank you for taking your job and this work very seriously. And I hope that you continue with this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next, we will call Jessica Viena. Okay. Next, we will call Solana Pissarro.
Hello, my name is Alana Pizarro-Susi. I'm a current junior at San Diego High and part of the SSD. I'm here lobbying for the reform of solitary confinement within San Diego County jails. I want to speak on the mental health impacts of solitary confinement and why this practice deserves urgent attention. Solitary confinement is very debilitating to the human mind. In New York State, the rate of suicide was more than 5 times higher for people in solitary confinement than people in general prison population. Humans are very social beings. When people are cut off from meaningful contact for long periods of time, the effect can be severe. Individuals in solitary confinement commonly experience anxiety, depression, panic attacks, insomnia, paranoia, and difficulty concentrating. Some develop hallucinations or lose their sense of time and reality. For people who already struggle with mental illness, isolation often makes these symptoms significantly worse, and these effects linger long after the confinement end. This issue is not about just prison policy, it's about human dignity and public health. If the goal of the correctional system is rehabilitation and community safety, then practices that intensify mental suffering and trauma move us further away from that goal. I urge you to support limits on prolonged solitary confinement and increase access to mental health care within correctional facilities, and invest in alternatives that prioritize safety without sacrificing humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Next, we will call Pat.
Hi, members of the board. My name is Pax Willoughby, she, her, and I'm a junior at San Diego High School. When I was little, I never really gave much thought to prison. However, over the past few months, my friend Nico has introduced me to the truly abhorrent process occurring just a few blocks away, solitary confinement. As a kid, I had a very limited understanding of jail. I almost likened it to being put in timeout. People who did bad things would be separated for a while and then come out all better. The real world is nothing like this, though. I don't pretend to comprehend what it's truly like in prison, but from the research I've done, I can say with confidence that things need to change. In addition to the adverse effects from being imprisoned in the first place, those whom we put in solitary confinement are exposed to some of the worst living conditions imaginable. And they aren't just free to go after, they're left with lifelong effects to their mental and physical health that are often worse than being in jail in the first place. A 2019 study of California prisons showed that the hypertension rates nearly tripled for inmates placed in solitary. Another study shows New York City solitary inmates were 3 to 7 times more likely to commit self-harm. And finally, from 2015 to 2019, New York State prisoners placed in solitary had a 5 times higher suicide rate. Solitary confinement is cruel and unusual. When we put prisoners in solitary, we aren't just putting them in timeout, we're increasing their chances of their deaths. Things don't have to be this way. By phasing out solitary and expanding mental health services for prisoners, we can reduce the number of people, of San Diegans, who we lose to the justice system. Members of the board, I hope that after hearing us speak today, you'll realize this issue is worth your attention. I hope that you'll support the policy proposal from Youth to End Solitary San Diego. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will call Amaya.
Hello, members of board. My name is Amaya Widener. I am also a junior at San Diego High School, and I am part of the SSD organization fighting against solitary confinement in San Diego prisons. Solitary confinement is often described as a tool of discipline, but in reality, it is a form of psychological harm that we should be working to eliminate. Imagine being locked inside a small cell for 20 to 24 hours a day, this going for weeks, months, sometimes years. This doesn't just make people feel lonely, it damages the mind in lasting ways. Individuals who were in solitary confinement were over 24% more likely to die in the first year after release. This is 78% more likely from dying by suicide. This isn't something damaging. This is something that causes long-lasting effects and can cost people their lives. If we believe in justice, then we should believe in humane treatment. Solitary confinement, as it is currently used, crosses them. It doesn't rehabilitate people, it harms them. It doesn't protect people, it just isolates. It's time to rethink this practice and work towards banning or strictly limiting solitary confinement, because no system of justice should rely on breaking a person's mind. I hope this inspires you to support addressing the issue of solitary confinement in San Diego prisons, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Next, we will call June York.
Hi, my name is June York, and I'm also a junior at San Diego High School. I'm also part of the SSD, which is Youth to End Solitary San Diego, and we are trying to end solitary confinement in San Diego as a youth organization. We are here today to ask for your support in our policy petition to phase out solitary confinement in San Diego County jails. The current solitary confinement system is really dehumanizing in many ways, one being that it's a complete violation of human rights. Solitary confinement is considered torture by the United Nations, so the fact that it still exists anywhere in the world is absurd and horrible. Solitary confinement has extreme effects on mental and physical health and completely disregards basic human decency. This causes extreme harm to the incarcerated population and even more problems for the public population, and it's only making our prison systems worse. Everyone in jail is still a person and deserves to be treated as one, not like an animal in a cage. No matter how horrible their crimes are. There are many ways to help people in jail recover from their crimes and get back on their feet, other than forcing them into a tiny room for months or even years with no outside communication or real mental or physical health treatment. As an organization, the SSD believes we need to end this torturous practice everywhere, and we want to start here in San Diego. In order to do that, we need your support. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Next, we will call Alejandra Sanchez Martel. Next, we will call Alexandra.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Alexandra Mishra. I am a high school student at San Diego High as well. I stand before you today to lobby for the reform of solitary confinement in San Diego. The science is unambiguous. Isolating a human being causes severe and lasting psychological damage. There are several cases of solitary confinement causing anxiety, depression, and hallucinations. Those who already live with mental illnesses are deemed unsafe by correctional facilities and are more likely to be put in solitary confinement without being treated for their mental conditions. These cases, isolation can only trigger psychotic breaks and enhance mental decline. Even for those who enter without one, it can create lasting psychiatric conditions that carry for the rest of their lives. This is not rehabilitation. It is harm and torture. Solitary confinement does not make our facilities safer like it supposedly does. Research shows it does not reduce violent incidents in the long term, and individuals released directly from isolation back into communities often struggle to function, making us less safe, not more. There are better options for dealing with people who may pose a safety risk to the greater prison population and the general public. Therapeutic housing units, structured step-down programs, trauma-informed care, and restorative approaches have demonstrated real results in states like Colorado, New Jersey, Connecticut, and more. These are soft alternatives. These are not soft alternatives, they are. Reform is not about excusing behavior, it is about recognizing that a system meant to correct cannot do its job by destroying the minds of one-sided. I urge this body to take meaningful action by establishing strict limits on the duration of use of isolation, mandate mental health oversight, and invest in proven alternatives. The measure of our justice system is how it treats those at its margins. We can and must do better. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next, we will call Nicole Lilly.
Hello, my name is Nicole Lilly. I'm the Executive Director of Our Time to Act, a youth-led 501c3 nonprofit organizing powerful youth for a more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable future. I'm here today to support the asks of Yes SD in their pursuit of ending solitary confinement in San Diego County. Solitary confinement is a violation of international law and the Eighth Amendment's protection against cruel and unusual punishment. In addition to being an inhumane practice, it has been repeatedly and decidedly proven to be ineffective and even directly contradictory to its intended outcomes. A study of individuals released from Washington state prisons found that those who spent time in solitary had a 64% recidivism rate compared to 41% for those who did not. In fact, the Vera Institute of Justice found individuals who spent any amount of time in solitary confinement were 24% more likely to die in the first year after release, with a specifically high risk for homicide and suicide. This practice does not foster safety. It leads only to greater harm for those exposed to solitary confinement, to staff, and to the general public. In New York State, the rate of suicide was more than 5 times higher for people in solitary confinement than in general population. Torture is not an appropriate punishment for a civilized society to participate in. I strongly urge this body to take the steps necessary to restore some humanity in San Diego County jails and end the practice of solitary confinement. In my final time, I want to say, as someone who organizes youth every single day, the fact that you have so many high school students out here in the month of May and eighth season, in the middle of near the end of their year, I think it's really significant, and I really urge you to listen to them. It takes a lot for youth to come out here and participate in these things, and youth have always been on the right side of history, so I strongly urge you to listen today. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Next, we will call Yasmin Eliminzen.
Good evening. My name is Yasmin Mizayan, and I am here to speak about the physical health consequences of solitary confinement. When someone is incarcerated, they do not stop being human. Regardless of the crime committed, people in custody remain under the responsibility and protection of the institutions that detain them. A prison sentence should never become a sentence to physical deterioration. Solitary confinement causes measurable harm to the human body. Individuals placed in isolation often experience sleep deprivation, weakened immune systems, chronic stress, muscle deterioration from lack of movement, headaches, cardiovascular complications, and long-term neurological effects. Many are confined to small cells for up to 22 or 23 hours a day, with minimal sunlight, minimal exercise, and minimal human interaction. These are not conditions that support rehabilitation or public safety. We cannot claim to value justice while knowingly placing human beings in environments that damage them physically and psychologically. Punishment should not mean deprivation of basic humanity. And beyond morality, this affects all of us. Most incarcerated individuals will eventually return to our communities. If we release people who have been harmed, isolated, and neglected, we are perpetuating cycles of suffering instead of creating pathways towards healing and rehabilitation. A society should be judged not only by how it treats the privileged, but also by how it treats the people it has the most power over. I urge this board to recognize the documented harms of solitary confinement and to support policies that prioritize rehabilitation, health, dignity, and human rights over isolation and harm. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Next, we will call Solana Pissarro. Next, we will call Alessandra Wall.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Alessandra Wall. I speak today as a clinical psychologist trained within the detention system, as a resident of San Diego, and in support of Yes SD's ask to phase out solitary confinement. Historically, solitary confinement was established by our custody systems in the guise of maintaining order and deterring misconduct. However, clinical reality tells a very different story. Instead of order, we find that solitary confinement exacerbates mental health issues rather than alleviating them. This doesn't create a safer environment. It actually leads to more disruption and volatility within the system. Perhaps most distressing is that those with pre-existing mental illness are significantly overrepresented in confinement. We are taking the most vulnerable population and placing them in environments that actively threaten their psychological survival. Research shows that the effects of isolation are often fatal, not only during incarceration due to higher rates of suicidality, but also long after release as individuals struggle to reintegrate. We have to ask ourselves a fundamental question. Is our carceral system designed simply to break and dehumanize individuals? Or is it designed to pair a term of punishment with rehabilitation of the individual back into the community? If the goal is rehabilitation, we will never achieve it by intentionally driving up rates of severe depression, emotional dysregulation, PTSD, anxiety, cognitive disruption. This issue is not about doing something that feels good. It's about establishing the purpose of our institutions. And if you believe the goal is to diminish a human being, then maintain the status quo. But if you believe our jails should facilitate a return to society, there is no other logical conclusion. Solitary confinement must be removed as a tool for behavior regulation. I walk the streets of San Diego and see the direct impact of chronic mental health, trauma, and unhoused population on our broader community. Please, I ask you pay attention, do something about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Next, we will call Angela. Angela Booker. Next, we will call Susie Pletner. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who is him?
Can you please state your name?
Nick Hill. Good evening. My name is Nico Pletner-Bober. I am a junior at San Diego High School, and I'm also the founder and executive director of Youth to End Solitary SD. We are a youth-led organization working to phase out solitary confinement use in San Diego County jails by lobbying our county sheriff. The reason we are here before you today is that we would like for you to publicly support Youth to End Solitary SD's policy petition, which aims to effectively end solitary confinement while maintaining safety within our jails. Our ask is that at your next meeting, you put voting on publicly supporting solitary confinement reform on the agenda to pressure Sheriff Martinez to implement necessary solitary confinement reform. We understand that you as a body do not have the power to make direct action on county jail policy, but regardless, we would still like your support to gain political pressure. Before I briefly review our policy goals, I would like to give an overview as to why we believe solitary confinement reform is necessary. The argument made by the sheriff and by members of the Corrections Officer Union is that solitary confinement is necessary for maintaining safety in our jails. But statistically, this is not the case. According to a study by Cornell University, individuals placed in solitary confinement had a 15% increase in recidivism. And as you have heard from my colleagues, solitary confinement has serious mental implications for prisoners, which will not decrease their likelihood of committing future crime, but rather increase it. I like to think of solitary confinement as the no child left behind policy implemented by President Bush. As I am sure you know, this legislation meant that schools receiving poor test scores would get less funding, assuming it would somehow encourage schools to improve their curricula to get better test scores. Solitary confinement is exactly the same. You take someone with violent behavior and put them in an environment which will result in mental decompensation while still expecting it to somehow prevent future violence.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Nikhil. You're also gonna be next, so. 1 second.
So 100% of those in solitary confinement in our county jails are not receiving life sentences, meaning that someday they will be released either back into our general population within our jails or into our communities. From these statistics and data you have been presented with, it is clear that this will worsen crime rates and make our jails and communities less safe. The claim that solitary confinement is also only used in exigent circumstances is also unsubstantiated. From our research, we learned that those in solitary confinement are not all there due to violent infractions. Individuals who committed non-violent infractions in jails can also be put in isolation. So, essentially, in addition to making individuals with already violent behavior more likely to commit violent acts, we are making individuals with no history of violent crime more likely to have violent episodes due to the several psychological implications of mental health. And I would like to just hit this problem home a little bit. Just a couple blocks away, we have several individuals held in solitary confinement in our downtown county jail branch. And to substantiate more on the humanitarian impacts that solitary confinement has, I would like to set the scene almost for what it is like in solitary confinement itself. I'm not sure if you know, but earlier this year we had 2 deaths in solitary confinement, and there was an op-ed written by San Diego Union Tribune that revealed very horrible conditions. There were inmates smearing feces on the walls. There were toilets clogging up, forcing urine and feces up from the toilet onto the ground of cells. There were inmates banging and screaming constantly, and this in a supposed attempt to improve violent crime. This is not how our county should be treating human beings, nor is it how we should try to approach addressing violent crime.
Thank you again, sir.
Thank you. Next, we will call Yusuf Miller. Okay, that concludes our request. That concludes our request to speak for our in-person.
Hello.
So move on to our online and call Yusuf Miller.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, this is Yusuf Miller, North County Equity and Justice Coalition, Saving Lives in Custody, California. And I'm here to speak about
Yusuf.
We lost your audio, Mr. Miller. Let's go ahead and call the next online. We'll come back to Mr. Miller.
Okay, next we will call Leslie Crawford. Go ahead. Leslie, can you hear us?
Yes, I had a mix there. I was
Okay.
going to give my time to Yusuf Miller. Obviously, he's in transit. So I'm going to put my objection, even though it was a great report that you're talking about later. It totally ignored George Bailey Detention Facility. My son Raymond Vogelman and David Sutter, Matthew Settles, both perished in George Bailey, and not due to drugs, to do nothing but the lack of procedure and administrative oversight to inmates. It's a very dangerous facility. It's totally overlooked by this report. And there's no reason to be putting those with mental health problems in with the general population in a jail facility that is so dangerous. I was really prepared to give up my time because I don't speak very well about these subjects. But this happened in 2022. David Settles is there tonight because we're still in pain. And there's no change. There's no change in the way the Sheriff's Department runs their policies and runs their institution. there's still not enough attention on mental health problems. So I thank you for the time, and I thank you for looking into this.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Next, we will call Deidre McLeod.
My name is Deirdre McLeod, and I'm a constituent of Supervisor Joel Anderson, District 2. My pronouns are she, her. Late in the last meeting, while discussing the sheriff's random body screening program, the SDSO rep said that radiation concerns were part of why this policy had not been more widely implemented among staff. This is textbook propaganda, just plausible enough to make you unsure that your common sense recommendations for keeping drugs out of our jails aren't worth pursuing. The dangers of radiation from body scanning have been thoroughly debunked, the same way deputies immediately overdosing by touching fentanyl has been debunked, and the same way excited delirium as a real condition requiring excessive force against Black men has been debunked. Yet not one member of this board pushed back against the rep's statement regarding body scans. If you knew he was wrong and did not say so, you are ceding the floor to misinformation, and San Diego residents are not hearing the truth. If you did not know this was false, this is why CLERB needs to hear regularly from others besides the sheriff about these issues, so you have the knowledge and information needed to push back when propaganda is spread during public meetings. I would also like to point out that the CNET presenter last month couldn't name the sheriff's office division tasked with conducting these random screenings of staff for the past 2 years. His comments heavily implied he's never even been through the process. One of this board's finest moments was pushing for body scans of everyone entering detention facilities. You sent that request back 3 times over SDSO refusals, ultimately settling for random screenings. But if there are sworn staff members who have never been randomly screened in the last 2 years, that compromise is effectively worthless. It is past time for this board to revisit the issue of full body scans of all staff entering detention facilities in order to keep drugs out of our jails.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Next, we will call John Settles.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Yeah, I was going to give my time to Yusef Miller as well, but I haven't prepared anything. But I guess since he is in transit, I will echo the sentiments of all these students who so graciously taken the time to come here and lobby the CLERB on the San Diego Sheriff's position on administrative segregation. I'm the brother of Matthew Settles. Matthew Settles actually committed suicide in administrative segregation at George Bailey after he was improperly cared for, denied medication. And we feel, as the family feel, that administrative segregation actually led to his death. He was improperly cared for. And right now, I'm looking at about 10 different reports that identify administrative segregation and solitary confinement as causing psychological harm and increased suicide risk within prisoners, as well as psych patients who end up being prisoners in San Diego County jails. San Diego County jails are one of the largest providers of mental health services because of the people who are the mental health patients that they end up receiving due to the legal system. So I think it bears examination and actual pushback on the sheriffs to let them understand that not only is it causing real harm to real people, but also there's many reports out there that really the science bears out the opinion that administrative segregation is contrary to all known and well documented treatment. So anyway, thank you for your time. Hope.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next, we will call Jordan Jackson Sosa. Jordan, can you raise your hand? Thank you.
Ask him to unmute.
Can you please unmute? Jordan, it shows that you're muted.
Let's come back to Jordan.
Oh, wait,
Hopefully he'll unmute.
He's showed up on another one. Try again.
Try speaking.
Hello, sorry. I was trying to fix my audio, but I'm Jordan and I wanted to dedicate my time to Nikhil Planner Booker. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So we are not so naive as to think that the sheriff can wave a magic wand and boom, solitary confinement is over. We have our policy petition was carefully researched in conjunction with the recent Dunsmore case settlement, which involved reforming mental health care in our jails, and our policy proposal aims to complement the reforms that were in that settlement. So from our research, we were able to categorize three main categories of prisoners who are in solitary confinement. One being individuals who were in solitary confinement because of mental health related reasons. Two, individuals who don't have a mental health diagnosis but committed a violent infraction. And then three, as I said earlier, individuals who did not commit a violent infraction and yet were still put in solitary confinement. So our policy petition attempts to address the individual circumstances of those three categories. So in terms of third category of individuals who are in solitary confinement for nonviolent infractions, we would like to see that there's a set list of certain infractions that can land you in isolation. It can't just be up to the discretion of a correctional official. There needs to be a set list of violent infractions that constitutes the exigent circumstance to put someone in isolation. This has had significant impact on correctional systems, particularly state correctional systems. North Dakota implemented a similar list of infractions that could lead to someone being put in isolation, and they have had significant improvement in their solitary confinement population. They've got it down to just 20 people, which is really impressive. And then I will save the rest of my comment for later.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next, we will call Marley Myers.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'd also like to dedicate all my time to Nikhil Planner Booker.
So in addition to the list of infractions that can leave someone in isolation, several other states have led to solitary confinement reform. Colorado is one, and what's interesting about Colorado's solitary confinement reform is they have a step-down approach, and that step-down approach is able to fit the individual needs of prisoners, as well as help people who have been in isolation for years transition back to the general population. So an example would be the first step being actual solitary confinement, and they put a 15 days max on that, which is 2 hours a day, and 2 hours out of cell a day with restraints, and then that slowly decreases to 4 hours of out of cell time a day in restraints with outdoor recreation and programming, and then that continues to go down. And so our policy petition fits into that, in that we instead, however, we would like to make it so that isolation can only occur for 4 hours at a time. We believe that isolation, solitary confinement must be used in extreme circumstances, because the longer someone is in solitary confinement, the worse their mental state becomes. And so we would like to be 4 hours in an isolated environment with 15 minutes. Every 15 minutes, there being a mental health professional checking in on a prisoner. with 2 hours possible extension at the discretion of qualified mental health care professional, in case someone is in such a state where they need to be kept in isolation longer for the health of an individual. And in later subsequent levels of isolation, levels of security, it allows people to work down the weighted general population, and it also makes it so that individuals who might not, their individual circumstances might not warrant a highly secure environment can still be separated from the general population, but be in an environment that does not have the significant negative impacts that isolation has.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next, we will call Beverly Allinger.
Yes, I would like to give my minutes to Yusuf Miller if he's available.
Yusuf is not here yet.
Okay, I'd like to wait and give him then. If he comes back online, please.
Okay. This is on. Next, we will call Christopher Crum. Christopher, can you raise your hand if you're online? Christopher, are you Ewan Bates?
Yes. I'm using my wife's computer, and that's her name. Sorry, this is Christopher Kroom. I am the faculty advisor for the Club of High School Students who's there petitioning you to end solitary confinement in our local jails. I wanted to be here to support my students, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. In any case, this is the synopsis of everything that's been discussed here tonight. Solitary confinement increases physical health problems, it increases mental health problems, and it increases recidivism. The whole purpose of the criminal justice administration system is to make sure we can one day rehabilitate anyone who can be rehabilitated so they can return to society and their relationship with the rest of the community can eventually be restored. Now, if we're going to hurt their physical health and their mental health and increase the likelihood that they become recidivists, how is this accomplishing the mission of restoring their relationship with the community? And much less, how is this keeping our community any safer if we continue to do this practice? Thank you very much for your time, and I would like to yield the rest of my time to Nico Pletner Booker.
Okay, thank you. Next, we will call Jonas Hisashu. If you're online, can you please raise your hand? Okay. We will move on to our written statements, request to speak. We have 2 written statements. Vice Chair, might I read those statements?
Please.
The first one is from Tom Packard. It states, I appreciate Assistant Sheriff Dustin Lopez attending your meeting. The community will appreciate knowing about specific changes to improve conditions in the jails. But the refusal of the sheriff herself to directly answer questions from the community about jail deaths is still a concern. When she attends your meetings, ask her not to bring a slideshow, but just answer questions from the community. That concludes Tom Packard's statement. Next, we have a statement from Dora Fan. The statement states, Black people make up 14% of the US population and over 45% of male prisoners in solitary confinement. Youth are hindered in development when placed in solitude for hours. Families often do not reconnect well with released individuals, and the public is exposed to safety risks when those incarcerated are released with mental illnesses. Abolishing solitary confinement will solve these issues. That concludes Dorfman's statement. Vice Chair, that concludes our request to speak for item number 3.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Let's move on to item 4, which is going to be the approval from the minutes from our April 2nd, 2026 meeting. Do any board members have any additions, deletions, or comments? Hearing none, do we have a motion? So moved. Dr. Brown has moved. Do we have a second? Okay. Yeah, Moody gets a second on that. Madam Secretary, hearing no comment, would you take a vote, please?
Vice Chairman.
Yes.
Secretary Pachano, yes. Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Dr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Mr. Teresa Rondon. Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Thomas.
Yeah.
Mr.
Yes.
Passes.
Thank you. At this point in time, we're going to move into item 5 on the agenda, which is a presentation that we have tonight on the independent study of in-custody deaths in San Diego County jails, which was conducted by the Mountain Whisper Light Corporation Statistics and Data Science section. I'd like to, first of all, introduce to you the authors of this study. First one is Dr. Nayak Basar, Cheryl Brown-Hill, Bill Nir Naha Mil Yachik, Dr. Patricia Way, and Michelle Deach. Presenting to us live in person tonight is Dr. Milacek. Doctor, please proceed. And just for everybody's edification, the other members that I named are going to be able to participate online.
This is okay, so this is our team. I want ourselves to go back one slide. We have 3 technical PhDs, 2 attorneys, and 1 director of prison and jail information lab. And I have to do the disclaimer. The opinions and findings of this presentation are those of the multi-risk team members and not necessarily reflect the opinion of CLERB or Sheriff's Office. Next, please. Next slide, please. So let's just go quickly to some history. In 2013, we looked at the articles. This first article raised public concern, and then series of articles report. Then just pointed out in 2022 California State Audit Report saying there may be systematic issues related to policy and procedures. And then article in 2024, more than 75 million maturity awards still since 2019. So this was 2 years ago. This next slide, please. So there was a previous study in 2022 that compared San Diego County with other California counties, compared dying in prison, in jail versus dying in the county and general population, and then use some data to extrapolate data. For example, racial position in jails were used from the arrest date. So this they find some good exploratory findings to open up to start the discussion. As started findings. So, for example, that if you look at the dying in jail and dying in the population, there's discord there, and this discord was biggest in the San Diego County. So the most people were dying in jail in San Diego County versus how many people dying in the county itself. So, but from these good exploratory findings to set the stage, we need to go close to the home. So the next slide, please. In this study, we focused on San Diego itself, the county. We tried to look at the risk factors of dying, to see who died, to understand who they were, how and when they died. when there is institutional factors can be found to correspond to associate with those deaths. We focus clearly only within the San Diego counties and jails, and we focus on actual numbers, not approximations. So only the numbers we actually got. Next slide, please. So what can be contracted if you exclude the right to roll, just look inside San Diego? What is A versus B so that it can be compared? We can look at the differences between facilities. We can look at differences across time. And the most important for us, differences between people who died. Yeah. So basic findings. I hope it didn't. Can you go from the previous slide, please? So go back. All right, go back one. Okay, let's do one by one.
Sorry, there.
Okay, so next slide now. So to obtain the data, the biggest issue here, we use the California Public Records Act and we use the Public Records Center platform, software platform. We submitted requests and resubmitted requests and multiple follow-up questions and requests. We looked across other places online where the data was disseminated from sheriff's office. We had a direct letter with sheriff asking for cooperation. We had a virtual meeting with sheriff's data team and with CLERB's contracting officer representatives. And we also have a special counsel from CLERB to help us fine-tune how to write these requests, how to write the rebuttal letter to optimize sheriff's cooperation. So this was a push team effort, pushing for a long time. However, next slide. In the end, only limited data was obtained. Most importantly for us, Sheriff's Office provided no necessary individual level information for all incarcerated people. But individuals who did not die, we hardly know more than their total daily counts and the dates of their social visits. You see here, it's too small to see this example of the most informative data we got on people who did not die, which is per facility their daily numbers. Next slide, please. So for statistical analysis, we did some statistical techniques that are fairly standard. Sometimes we can do it creatively. So we will partition deaths into various compartments and compare their counts and percentages. Occasionally, we could calculate the rate, which is count of something per person, which is much more informative. And we also look at statistical methodology that associates features together, associates and finds correlation with. Next slide. I hope we didn't skip anything. Or this slide.
Was that it?
All right. Next one. Yes. So 5 basic facts. We got 12 hours of data. 12 years of data with a little bit of 2011, a little bit of 2024, but 12 solid years from 2012, 2023, and with 179 reported deaths. Next slide. So let's look at the facilities from the largest to the smallest, and you see the facilities really make big difference. George Bailey, the largest, had 25 deaths. Central Jail, 91, although it's almost nearly twice more. And we put in a frame here 3 booking facilities that really stand out among facilities. They're special for their booking. You'll see them later in the day. Next slide, please. Number of deaths were remarkably constant if you split them into 2 years intervals. For the first 12 to 13, first 2 year interval, there were 20. But then look at the numbers in the next two years intervals. 31, 31, 32, 31, 33. That's remarkably consistent. You would think a play of chance would have 29, 34. No, it's stable. Even the COVID result, even COVID times could not change this result. Next slide, please. This is unexpected. Now, this is looking at facilities. Now look at the big picture. Step back and look at the big pictures. All facilities across time. And if you just concentrate here on the rightmost, which is for all years together, unfortunately, the picture is a little small. So let's look at all years. This is the rightmost, and the height of a bar would be a personal, something like personal probability of dying. If you're in that facility on any given day, that would be your personal probability of dying in that facility. So we see that these smaller facilities are very visible. Their bars are very low. Then with George Bailey and Las Colinas really starts, and the bars start showing up. But then Vista, boom, 3 times higher. And then Central Jail, boom, nearly twice the Vista. So that says where the issue is really concentrated. So we use the words. When it comes to impact to depths, Central Jail is a new universe of its own. It stands higher. Next slide, please. When it comes to violence against staff and homicides, again, Central Jail is a universe of its own. Here we have a plot of on one x-axis we have death rate, which is death per person present in the jail, and on the y-axis you have offenses against staff. Again, you have facilities kind of grouped together and then shooting star Central Jail far out. In both the measures standing out. Also fell off the 50 homicides occurred in Central Jail. Next slide. Now we're going to look some descriptives, just looking at the people who died and their death counting, comparing their deaths. For manner of death, four manners: accident, homicide, natural, suicide. Somebody already mentioned 55% of all deaths were not natural, and this other line, 85% of accidents were really overdoses. When you see overdose, you can think accident. When you see accidents, you can think overdose. They are not synonymous, but very close to be. Next slide, please. And then regarding minor of death, here is some interesting trends over the years. Overdoses, the yellow bars were increasing. Suicides, the pink bars were decreasing, and there's some staying the same. That's a clear trend within. We're going to continue now. Next slide, please. Now, age and race. Let's split it into 4 age groups: the youngest under 30, oldest over 60, and then middle age split into 2 groups halfway through. What do we see? Group under 30, they died from accidents and suicides, accidents and overdoses. The oldest group over 60, they died natural deaths, and then in the middle, the middle-aged group, middle-aged people who died of various causes. And if you look at homicides, deaths where homicides were concentrated in the middle age and in Central Jail. Next slide, please. Now, I have this breakdown by the race, and it's small to see, so I'm going to just give you quickly a summary. About half of all deaths involved white individuals. Half of that involved Hispanic individuals. Half of that involved Black individuals. Next slide, please. And if you look at the age and race together, what in median age, median is like center of the data. How old were the people in the center of the data who died? Hispanics are noticeably younger than everybody else. 12 years younger, smaller median of Hispanics individuals who died than of Black and white. Or yeah, that is 12 years is a lot. So there's a clear separation there. Next slide, please. Now, gender, there were only 13 female deaths, but some patterns emerged in some, and even in such small number. When this number is small, statistically, you get a lot of chance. However, we can say statistical certainty that the females who died were more often Black. You'll see that one of the peaks corresponds to the Black females is highest among the females, while in the males it's not prominent at all. And then on the right, you can similarly, out of 13 female deaths, 10 were natural. So females died much more often on natural causes than males. Next slide, please. Length of incarceration prior to death. That is number of days between booking and death. This is where booking facilities stand out. This is where deaths happen fast. So when you say you can see here median days, this is Central Jail 13, Vista 13, Las Colinas 39. This is number of days when half of deaths occurred. So it took less than 2 weeks in Central Jail and Vista versus George Bailey took 4 months, or other facilities even longer to get to the 4 deaths. So this is where booking facilities are really stand out. Next slide, please. Now, if you look at the length of incarceration prior to death relative to manner of death, it's accidents, overdoses, and suicides that happen really fast. So again, we have so these bars are, if you look at the report, bars speak of the first bar is the booking date, and then the day after, then after the first week, after the next first month, and the later months. You see different patterns for different members of that. Accidents reoccurred fast, so these first bars are very high. So I'm going to summarize again. About a quarter of all accidents happen on the booking day or day one, and nearly half of all accidents and nearly half of all suicides within the first week. Natural deaths occurred on time all over the time scale, and homicides happen actually later in time. Next slide, please. This is quickly just checking the status. 85% have not been sentenced when they died, and there's a little bit of pattern even here. So mostly age-wise, mostly youngest and the oldest group were mostly unsentenced. And then among facilities against central jail stands out. Actually, if you could see these three bars, red, purple, and blue in the center, they are high above the gray bar, meaning that in those booking facilities, this is where people die unsentenced. Highest proportion. And among the manner of death, suicides were the most unsentenced ones. Next slide, please. Okay, now going to institutional factors. This is where we had a little bit more data than just people who died. We had some data on the people who did not die to compare more impactful analysis. Next slide, please. First is on occupancy levels, and we can say that this is statistical certainty in central jail. The occupancy level in central jail was directly related to the death rate, putting everyone at a greater risk of dying. So you see these two curves following each other. The black curve is time density of deaths. When there are more deaths happening at the shorter time, it goes up. The density goes up versus occupancy, the red line, and see how they go up and down together until COVID days, COVID years. Then they split apart because deaths increase then relative to occupancy, and then they come back together again. So I can say this the following way: if you are inside the central jail, on the day where 100 more people were somewhere inside the same facility, your personal chance of dying would increase by a third. That was the fact. Next slide. Oh, we tried also in Vista. We couldn't find, interestingly, we couldn't find a similar correlation. This table strange. Security enforcement staff levels, the levels of particularly sergeant detentions and deputy sheriffs for detention court services staff. Those are directly correlated to the death rate at the central jail. Look at this plot shows 12 points for 12 years. Red points are not COVID years. 3 white points are COVID years. And I think it's pretty obvious this correlation here. The more sergeant detentions per person in jail with this x-axis, the smaller the death rate on the y-axis in central jail. We looked at the Vista, and the same pattern nearly emerges, but we couldn't tell that it statistically couldn't distinguish it with certainty from web chance. So we couldn't make a statistical comment for Vista. Next comment. Mental health budget and staff levels were sharply increasing over years. You see the first these two bars are going up from green to blue, and I cannot say it's the result, but we look at how it affected overdoses and suicides. Overdoses went up, suicides went down. There's some stay constant. So one would investigate further how this mental health effort resulted in this pattern of deaths. Next slide, please. Social visits. This is slightly sophisticated, so I have to be very careful to say, in the 3 booking facilities, social visits seemingly had a protective effect for people at high risk of dying. There is some, in our question and answer session, there is a question of this I can answer in a bit more detail. I will say the following. What you see here in the y-axis is rate visit of people who are at high risk of dying in jail. And the number one, this dash line is the baseline for each facility. That means visit rate of everybody in that facility. So we see that the red dot in central jail, people who are at high risk of dying in that central jail had just a little bit higher visit rate than everybody else in the facility. In Vista, they had noticeably higher rates, those who were at high risk of dying. And in Las Colinas, nearly double those who were at high risk of dying had a visit rate than everybody else in it. So the trend emerges among both facilities. the more those high risk of dying in jail, the more visits they received, there was less deaths in that facility. This is preliminary based on the little data, but the pattern is emerging and it would be super interesting to continue and analyze this with more data. Next slide, please. Now, actions taken by the Sheriff's Office to prevent jail deaths were numerous, but there is really no data to assess their effectiveness. Drug sniffing dogs, body scanners, or more medical staff. That's all great. We just need data to assess their effectiveness. Next slide, please. The recommendations. This is the biggest slide of the presentation. CLERB needs the authority to assess this Sheriff's Office data. Sheriff's Office possesses rich individual level historical data on the entire jail population. We saw it. They gave us to see the 30 days of this data, not 12 years. So 30 days was not enough analysis. CPRA method is not the way to obtain this data. And this is our final recommendation. No future study should begin before this data is provided in advance. This is what we sometimes refer to as the pot of gold. Give us the pot of gold. Facilities recommendations. As these recommendations now follow the slides that you've seen already. Sheriff's Office should also concentrate its efforts to Central Jail in Bismarck. This is where the issue is concentrated really. Occupancy levels in Central Jail. Sheriff's Office should make all the efforts to decrease population. Next slide, please. Also, Sheriff's Office should make any possible effort to increase this informed staffing. We clearly saw that their increased presence, it has the preventive effect of that. I should not say clearly so. We really strongly suggest, data strongly suggest those particular positions have been applied. Manhattan staffing budget. I show you the slide. The question is, why is so much more staffing and funding resulting in these patterns of the suicides and overdoses? This needs further investigation. Social visits. We encourage the Sheriff's Office to offer social visits, especially in Central Jail, especially early in the booking, immediately after the booking process, as early as frequently, as easily as possible. And then comment on the actions taken by the Sheriff's Office. Sheriff's Office should in the future provide historic data concerning all the measures they have implemented to allow follow-up study to assess what was effective and what was not. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is the last slide now.
All right. Sorry.
Yeah, this one. So you have to understand we had very limited data and we tried to, I would say, squeeze as much as we can from these data, and it's still reliable and shows the trail in signature data. So here the social visits. First, we envision, let's say, similar vision analysis, that people who died in jail are the best proxies we have for people at high risk of dying in jail. To give an example, somebody is attacked or somebody is put in a precarious situation. Their friends and families and whoever is concerned sees this and gives this person more social visits to try to put him in a better state of mind. I'm just giving an example of somebody who's attacked, somebody who sees that he's put in a precarious situation or being neglected for anything like that. So now that person could have died or could have not died. If he came close to dying and did not die, we do not see the person. We don't have this. It's lost in a sea of people who never died. That's why we need data of people who did not die. If on a spur of a moment the person died, he becomes visible to us. There is such a small difference, such a small distance from sometimes from dying and dying close and not dying. And so those people who really were at the highest risk of dying but managed to pull through, they don't have the same social visits or social rates, or very similar to those who actually crossed the limit and unfortunately died. So we use the people who died in jail, their social visits, as the best proxy we have for people who were nearly died, who had a high risk of dying in jail. And so if you're looking that way, then we see that this plot that we see here is on the y-axis the actual actual social visits of people who died, because this is what we see. But they speak of the increased social visits rate of people who were at high risk of dying, but they managed to pull through. And then we see the pattern. The more visits they receive, the less death rate in those booking zones. So that's that. So then I'm going to refer a couple of next questions to Patricia. Patricia, wait. Question number 7.
You can ask her to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you. First, I'll turn to, it's not so much a question, but a comment. Glad that the Mountain Whisper Light acknowledged that using accidents and suicides as proxies for mental health related deaths is a crude comparison. I don't believe they are the same. And yes, I just want to reemphasize that we did not receive any mental health data about any incarcerated person or who died, or anyone who did not die. And so, but we had a sense that mental health was important and wanted to address that to some degree. And so we turned to accidents, which are largely overdoses, and suicides as essentially a proxy for that. But wanted to make sure that we also noted that they're not the same thing, but that this is something to look further into, and also try to get the data about mental health treatment for those inside. The next question is about it says, notes that while suicides decreased, accidents and overdoses increased. The decrease in suicides is likely due to added mental health professionals, also addition of Noxalone to facilities. But the increase in overdoses is likely due to increases in the prevalence of fentanyl. Were they, meaning the Mountain Whisper Light, I believe, able to track what drugs cause the accidental overdose deaths? We did not track that. There's some indication in the data that we received of the particular drug that was relevant to a particular overdose, but that is not an area that we looked further into. It was not one of the manner of deaths, and we did also look at means of death, but that was a category listed under causes of death, and in another category of some related circumstances, but it's not what we covered in this study. And the next question, in your response to the identified area question 5.5.3, what is the underlying relationship between mental health services in jails and in custody deaths? In 4.3.3, you state no data was acquired about mental health history or treatment of specific individuals while in detention. You do note encouragement about the decreasing rates of suicides. Based on the totality of your investigation, are you able to agree that mental health is a majority issue with inmates, a predominant factor in the SDSO death rates? Where it makes sense, it's common sense that this is the problem, and research in other contexts does tell us that as much. But again, we did not receive any data about the mental health histories, the mental health treatment of any incarcerated person, whether they died in custody or whether they did not. We only received mental health information from the Health and Human Services Agency about treatment that people received from the county prior to being incarcerated. We did not receive anything about anyone once they were incarcerated. And so we can't really make any statements about the impact of mental health, although it stands to reason. And again, that is why we used accidental deaths, again, overdoses and suicides as sort of proxies, because we didn't get any straightforward data about mental health histories or treatment. I don't know if Nirnaya, you want to say anything more about any of those, or Michelle, if you have any other thoughts you'd like to share in terms of those questions related to mental health.
You will need to unmute.
In that case, so I didn't know if anyone else was trying to jump in there, but if not, then I suppose we can then move on to the next set of questions, occupancy and staffing.
I think Michelle is on.
Okay, sorry, I had nothing more to add on the mental health issue. We do know, of course, that that is a very prevalent issue among people who are incarcerated in the jail. But again, we did not have the data to dig into that in any more detail.
Okay, thank you. So we'll continue then with questions. Here's another. When occupancy levels at the facilities ebb and flow, particularly at central jail, do staffing levels also change to correspond to occupancy? So many deputies, so many surgeons, supervisors, and all, are these ratios the same in all the facilities? Same questions for medical staff. We didn't go into this level of detail. We were satisfied to see that occupancy levels as they ebb and flow, they correspond to death rate, and on the other side, staffing levels, and they ebb and flow, they also correspond to that level. That's about the answer for that question. We didn't look more into that kind of level of details, comparing everything with everything else. Next question. You were unable to state it soon. Oh, sorry. While you make the case for more staffing in sergeant detentions, you say there is no way you were able to establish a correlation with the deputy sheriff position, which is, I guess, another enforcement, security enforcement position. Without empirical proof, are you able to form any opinion? Is it true that your analysis is based only on data provided by sheriff's office, and if you did not personally interview any personnel, including deputy sheriffs? Regarding the specific deputy sheriff position, it's in our supplementary files, we have a plot for that. We didn't see that those particular staff positions correlated with the death rates as the death rates went up and down, these positions stayed constant. So we said, okay, we don't see it in this position. However, it's kind of makes sense to think that all enforcement staff works together. So increase, let's say, future increases sergeant detentions, which are really correlated strongly, may require an increase in deputy sheriffs only for logistic purposes. As a statistician, I'm off base to comment on that. Okay, so next. This will be now a series of questions to address to Patricia. This takes 10 questions that I guess you can address that.
Yes, so there's a set of 10 questions that are different but similar in terms of asking about a particular factor or circumstance or the context of specific in custody deaths that happened. And what I want to say at the outset is that the Mountain Whisper Light asked very similar kinds of questions in terms of factors and circumstances surrounding particular in custody deaths. We asked similar questions in our CPRA requests, and on the whole, we were not able to obtain any data that included any specific factors other than we received one data set that had the basic information that the jail system information system stores, like the date, location of a death, social demographics of the people who died, the manner of death, means of death, cause of death, those things. But specifically, a particular context of a death was not data that was provided to us. So I can read these 10 questions, but the answer to each of them, unless you tell me differently, but I can read them all. The answer to each of them is that we did not receive data in order to do this analysis.
The one thing that I would just add to this is to say that these were really good questions. They're very insightful. They're important questions, and we would have loved to have gotten the data so that we could have looked into those issues.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so those questions are, there have been instances where an incarcerated person or cellmate allegedly called for help using the cell intercom system, and a death ultimately ensued. Were there any statistics over the 12-year period where an intercom was allegedly used, but there was allegedly not a response from deputies and a death resulted? Excellent question that we did not get data to answer. Next question. Do you have statistics on the number of deaths that occurred, at the hands, sorry, my screen is not moving. I'll start over. Do you have statistics on the number of deaths that occurred at the hands of a cellmate? If so, do you have information on the motive or rationale for the homicide by the perpetrator? Mental health issue, gang-related, religious ideology, etc. No, we did not have the data for that. Question number 3. How many deaths or homicides were associated with or may be attributed to the victim's known charges for crimes against women and children? For this one, I want to add that, so we did not have the data for this. We did ask for data about the underlying charges, about the people who were incarcerated and the people who died, and we were only provided, this is what Nirnaya had referred to in terms of that pot of gold, or the data that had the 1 month of information about everyone incarcerated in the detention facilities, but 1 month was not enough information to do an analysis on. But we did get 1 month of information about the crimes that people were charged with, the underlying charges, but we weren't able to do the analysis. So obviously we couldn't do it in terms of crimes against women or children. The next question, number 4, was any information captured that recorded the amount of time that elapsed between the time an incarcerated person was observed or found in medical distress, still alive, but either a deputy or an incarcerated person, by either a deputy or incarcerated person, and when a medical professional, not a deputy, actually made contact with him that resulted in a death. So the amount of time that elapsed between the distress and when a medical professional saw the person, we did not receive that information. How many natural deaths occurred with 24 hours of an incarcerated person being seen by medical staff? How many within 16 hours? How many within 8 hours? Again, excellent information to gather and do an assessment on, but we did not receive that information. How many suicides were there by incarcerated people, either currently in isolation cells at the time of death or previously in isolation cells within 14 days of removal? The next question, of the natural or accidental deaths, how many were discovered by deputies? How many were discovered by the incarcerated people? What percentage of each? What time of day were the deaths discovered in each category? Natural, accidental, suicide, homicide. Was there any information pertaining to suicidal or accidental deaths and the amount of recreation time they were afforded? Is there a correlation between suicide and or accidental deaths and the amount of recreation time and or the type of recreation provided? And finally, the last question in this category of specific information about the circumstances of the deaths. Has there been any research done on the nutritional value of the meals served, the incarcerated people's actual eating habits, and suicidal or accidental deaths? In other words, if an incarcerated person only eats candy bars all day, is this recorded anywhere, or are all the meals balanced and it's not an issue or factor? That's the last of this set of questions.
Thank you. So then, 2 more questions. One was actually addressed to the sheriff's office, so I can just read it. What of all accidents, overdoses happen on booking day of day 1? Question for sheriff's office: is there any way to determine whether they obtained drugs in jail once they got there? No, it's more likely they were taken before being booked. All right. So, and then final 2 questions will be addressed to Michelle to address about recommendations. Michelle, will you read them or shall I?
I could go ahead. So it says in recommendation 6.3.1.17, you recommend that this screening measure can be used to assess people who appear to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs, who are exhibiting concerning behaviors or an altered mental state, or who are undergoing withdrawal or medical or mental complications due to an overdose. These high-risk individuals should be brought instead to a medical or detox facility until such time as they are cleared for admission to the jail. Have you considered the major fiscal cost for SDSO to do this? And I think that the best way to respond to that is to throw the question back and to say, what about the major fiscal and human costs of not doing so? Some of these high-risk individuals die in the jail, which results in extraordinary payouts for the county in lawsuit settlements. So the costs are there one way or the other. This just seems like a very protective approach to help prevent deaths. The next question is, you state in recommendation 6.3, due to the limited explanatory nature of the descriptive results alone, the Mountain Whisperer Light cannot recommend specific actions based on the descriptive analysis, but can offer suggestions on what needs to be investigated. Based on the totality of your investigation, can you offer at least 3 things you would immediately implement to reduce in-custody deaths if you were the San Diego County Sheriff? And this may be a good point for me to just say that I'd like to just address the people who spoke earlier today, particularly people who lost loved ones in the jail, and to just say how much we are sorry for their losses. But there are many, many things that we might recommend based on what we know in other contexts about what could work to prevent deaths. But we are limited in our responses to the material that we received here. And we didn't have the basis in our data to discuss many of those other kinds of recommendations. So we're limited in how we can answer this question. But based on our research, we would recommend the following. The first and most important thing focuses on the fact that people are dying in those first couple of days in jail. We recommend the development of a screening tool to identify high-risk presenters at booking. Examples include people with an altered mental status, people who are severely intoxicated to the point where they can't answer questions, people who are pregnant, people with chronic diseases, people who are literally, they are not in their right state of mind. Those people have to be taken to a different setting, such as an ER, where they need to be seen by medical personnel and to be cleared before being brought into the jail. So that would be our first high priority recommendation. The second idea is to do a deeper dive into natural deaths and figure out whether these are deaths that are due to deficient medical care. Is it because people are not being identified at booking as being at high risk? Or are these people dying of other causes, but they're being classified as having a natural death? So the word natural tends to hide a lot of things that we don't really understand. But just because it's natural doesn't mean it's not preventable. So a deep dive into those deaths is really important. And our third recommendation is reducing crowding and capacity at the SDCJ. It's worth noting that we don't have any basis for recommending anything about suicide prevention approaches here because we don't have data about the specific policies and programs that the sheriff's office has implemented. So we can't speak to which of those measures and initiatives are effective or not.
Thank you. So these are the questions we received before.
Thank you very much. I must apologize in between having problems pronouncing that. I have dyslexia here. The person that's present here with us tonight is Mr. Bilyachik, and I misidentified him as Dr. Polisar, and I apologize for that. We're going to now shift into opportunity for CLERB board members to make comments or ask further questions. I started off our CLERB chair, Marianne Pintar, is not able to be here tonight. She's away on required work. I would like to read the comment that she asked me to make on her behalf. Thank you to the Mountain Whisperer Light for the hard work they put into the development of this report. I appreciate your perseverance through what was a difficult process. I appreciate your commitment and the product. I personally would also add, thanks, I think that even though we would like to have been able to have more information, so you can be a little bit more definitive. You certainly have assisted us in shedding light on the important issue of reducing in custody deaths in the jail. And having said that, I'll now turn it over to board members. Dr. Brown.
Thank you. This was extremely enlightening, educational. To me, even though we didn't get the data that we think we should have, one thing is real evident here is that the trauma. We need to do more. It seems like we're working on what I'm trying to say is that the trauma that we're all functioning under seems to be not on our conscious enough. We need to find some kind of way to address it, to talk about it, to find resources to help everyone, not only the people coming into the jail, but the people who are there to protect them. I know there are organizations around town, or I think some that might be interested in working with us. And we should approach them, and I'll talk to us about that often. Not here tonight. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, did you consider evaluating other options for receiving the data? Was any of that, like say, for example, since we couldn't get it from the sheriff as much as we wanted from the sheriff department, what I'm hearing, did you consider going to maybe the medical examiner's office, or someone like that, to answer some of the questions? Now yield back to the board.
And let's give them a chance to respond to your question.
Thank you. Cheryl will be the perfect answer to this question. Cheryl or Michelle.
All right, Cheryl, will you take that one?
I can start and I'll let you chime in. We did contact other agencies, for example, in our quest for additional information through the CPRA request. We did do a request that was statewide to various agencies. So yes, we did go forth and contact other agencies. And I'll let Tricia or Michelle follow up.
May I jump in and add something to the public? We've emphasized getting the data. You can't make any conclusions without the data. And also comparing those who died to those who didn't die allows you to identify a cause. And once you have a cause, then somebody can try to do something about changing that cause so that there are fewer deaths. So getting the data and then comparing those who died with those who didn't die is an essential element that we need going forward in these future studies. And that's why we emphasize so much in our presentation that we couldn't do so many interesting and helpful things because we did not give the data. Okay, back to the team here. The team, by the way, was assembled years ago, 3 years ago. Very excellent, experienced people, and that they're the essence of the word team because they work together. I hardly had to do anything. I'm ahead of the study, but all the work was done by these team members. So thank you for the opportunity to say those things.
Thank you. One thing I'll just add in response to the comment about the medical examiner. While there's a lot of interesting and important data that can be obtained from a medical examiner, you can't get any information about people who didn't die from them. And the comparison has to be between people who died and people who didn't die.
I'll also just add that we did use the Next Request platform to submit our requests to the different agencies that Cheryl had alluded to. There were 5 different departments in the county that we requested data. They were the Department of Behavioral Health Services, Medical Care Services, Homeless Solutions, and Equitable Communities. and the Department of Housing and what is it? Housing and Community Development. I think, and in each case, and the final one was the Office of Financial Planning. The requests were all closed without any provision of data because the data we were requesting, which was about incarcerated people, these agencies were not the holders of that data. The sheriff's office was the holder of that data. And so we did not receive any information, even though we did try these other routes. The one area where we were moderately successful was with behavioral health services, which I believe that the Health and Human Services Agency fits under. And HHSA was extremely cooperative, and they did provide one data set for us. It included information about the people who did die in custody during the study period, and it provided information about, among that group of people, the last fiscal year in which those people received mental health services from HHSA. It could not tell us whether anybody else who died and didn't use their services may have used private mental health services, or even those who did use their services. We don't know if they also used private mental health services. So it's very limited what we can say about what HHSA was able to tell us. We did a little bit of analysis on that we submitted in the mini report C that we did. I don't know if Nirnaya say anything off the top of his head about that, but anyway, we did make attempts to obtain the necessary data for the study in these other avenues, and we're mostly unsuccessful in obtaining that, but we did receive that little bit from HHSA.
Thank you. Do any other board members wish to comment? Very well, Ms. Fasano.
Okay, my question is, there was a lot of references made in this report this evening about difficulties in getting data from the person. Do you have an estimate? Do you have an estimate of what data, what percentage of the requests you actually fulfill?
That's an interesting question. However, 80% of requests, one request lasts for much, one request lasts for little. So even, it should be weighted by how much informational content in every request to give you some kind of, for me, meaningful average. What is the average of requests? You have, I never held a count of requests and repeat requests. Do you have, Trisha, maybe, or Cheryl, do you have something like a quick rough estimate? But again, fulfilling one request that was really useful it's better than having 20 small requests that are just informational. So, but apart from that, Cheryl or Patricia, do you have any, can you make an estimate of that? What percentage of requests are actually fulfilled?
That would be very difficult for me to say. I believe that we received, and excuse me for my voice, I don't believe that we received. It's hard. It's difficult.
The extent to which you were unable to get data or information from CLERB, what kind of impact would that have on your ability to draw conclusions and make recommendations? Would you say it was significant?
Yes, so we spoke about this on the slide on contrast. Once you close yourself, you could just look at San Diego, never compare to anything with the rest of the world. What can you contrast inside? And the biggest contrast, person who enters jail and dies, and person who enters jail and does not die. If you don't have that, you're capped 90% of it, and it just goes away. And what you're looking at, maybe 10% of what could have been presented today if you had that pot of gold.
Okay, and then the last point is, to what extent it is delayed in your ability to complete the study. I know we got some reports along the way that the study period had to be extended. Was that directly related to the lack of response?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it required to repeat it, knocking on the same door. Try smarter ways, try still smarter ways.
And what would you say the delay was? A year, 2 years?
I will refer to the Cheryl, Patricia, they were working the most in that department in terms of dates. How was the estimate, what was the estimate at the very beginning and what was the end? When we said, okay, we are closing the gap, we setting that deadline for receiving the data and closing the data date. I remember there was this, in our report, I think that's the plot, which speaks of the dates and how long people lasted. Cheryl or Patricia, you can say something on that? How much we hope it's gonna last and try at the end how much it lasted.
I can start, Cheryl, if you want to jump in after. So from when we submitted our first CPRA request, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
It was a year and 2 months with multiple attempts to obtain the data. It was a year and 2 months from when we initially submitted our first CPRA to when the period was closed and we were no longer receiving data. So about a year and 2 months. We began keeping track of when the date that we submitted a request, and then the number of delays and how many months. It was for each CPRA, it was months long that the delays took place. It was not a year for each of the CPRAs. It was months long, but from beginning to end to receive all the did take over a year. I hope that makes sense. But there was definitely several months of delays with each one of them.
But Patricia, even before we submitted the first request, the investigation before that, from the commencement of the study, it still took some time, right? Until the first CPA was finally submitted.
I'm sorry, Nirnaya. It's really sometimes it's hard to hear because the microphones are breaking up. I wasn't sure if you were just adding a comment to what I said or if you were asking something.
Right. I was saying that there was also a time period from the commencement of the study until our first request was submitted. That also time was time for looking for answers.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for Tricia made that comment. I was going to comment. We can hear the online people really well. It's really tough in here, so need to quick housekeeping. Everybody need, and it was not Ms. Fasano's fault. Her mic lit up, but it wasn't working. But everybody needs to reach over and get right in front of their mic and turn it on and off. Having said that, is there any further board member comment? Yes, we have a question. Go ahead, Ms. Federico Mondragon.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I did have a question about the social visits. Does that include visits from legal? Any legal support that they may be receiving? What is a social visit?
They gave us a file called the social visits. Here are the dates. Were they video visits or just in person visits? We don't even know that.
Okay. No time, no.
There were dates. Maybe the time on this.
Yeah, I'm just.
And facility.
My assumption from the way that the policy is written is that those don't include legal visits. I would guess that those are something separate.
Okay. Thank you. I think just overall, we're always coming back to this issue about public health, mental health overdoses. Wondering what, yes, like the sheriff's department can't solve all the problems, but I think there needs a lot to be done for prevention, intervention, support, before folks are ready to enter the jail. So I'm just wondering how those conversations look like after this report, right? You already presented, that there's issues. I believe the board of supervisors, they're looking at crisis before care. So like how can these findings help elevate mental health care access, response, intervention for incarcerated people that are going through incarceration. And I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me was that 85% of people hadn't been sentenced. I think that was the percentage, right? I don't know. That's a very powerful percentage. They're waiting a sentence. They're a very vulnerable population. So I just wanted to share.
Thank you very much. Yes, Dr. Thompson.
Quick question on the data that you don't get from the sheriff's office. What are they saying? Are they saying they don't have the data, they can't put it together, or are they just saying nothing?
You should. That's weird.
It varied. In some instances, they said that they don't categorize information in that way. And so, according to the public records law, they're not required to produce a particular data set just to meet a request. And so if they don't hold the data in the way that we had asked for it, or keep track of those particular categories, even if they have the information, they're not required to produce that. They also denied some of the requests based on issues of privacy and protecting those, whether it was incarcerated people or employees or staff. They also said that with the pot of gold, that they're only required by law to supply just the most recent 30 days worth of data. And so that's what they supplied rather than what would have been very helpful information for all of the incarcerated people during the study period. And then it's in the report, but just a reminder that CLERB ended up hiring attorneys to respond to the, I suppose, legal positions that the sheriff's office was stating in their denials of the provision of data. And so some of it was it needed to be navigated by a legal team because there were legal rationales for why they were not providing the data. But they never just said we're not going to provide it. There was always a reason that they did provide.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to move over into public comment from the public. Yes, certainly, Mr.
Thank you. First, I want to thank you all for the work that you did with the lack of access that you had. You mentioned in the beginning, I believe, that San Diego County has more in custody deaths than other counties in California. Was that correct?
Compared to deaths in their general population.
Right. I mean, right. So I know no one in our county wants to be at the top of that list, right? Including our sheriff's office. No one wants to be at the top of having the most in custody deaths. But it seems to me that maybe our sheriffs are doing or not doing something that other counties either are doing or not doing. There's a reason that we're on the top. So have other counties done similar studies? And you talk about comparing in custody deaths to those who don't die, but I wonder if comparing in custody deaths from one county to another can be helpful, specifically if that county might have more access to data. And is our access to data unique to San Diego County? On my question.
Can I say something just from a statistical point of view? Things are getting sophisticated here. When comparing those people who died in jail and those people who died in a county, in a county could have been a plague that has nothing to do with jail, or so it's tricky. It doesn't matter what happened to you when you're outside the jail. That's life outside. when you enter there, then the jail conditions responsible, and then we want statistics on that. When you enter, not really what's happening with before when you were freeman. So it is great exploratory data to have like a picture of this, but then you really need to layer it in, it's inside yourself.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm not really asking to explore deaths in Los Angeles County versus San Diego County, but I meant our county facilities, our jail, right? If we have more deaths per capita of incarcerated persons,
Right, that's it.
what are we doing or not doing differently than other places that put us at the top of that list? So if there was another study done in other counties, how does our study compare to theirs? How do our numbers compare to theirs? And is it unique that our sheriff does not provide access to data, or is that something that is common across counties of the state? Is what I was asking. And I don't know if you know the answer to that or not, but that was just my question.
Thank you, sir.
Based on that conversation, I have a question.
Dr. Brown.
Okay, I want to make sure I heard it. I'm trying to turn my mic on, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Oh, no. That's that. Okay, thank you. But I want to make sure I understand you correctly, sir. And again, I want to thank you for the study as well. You said that we have the highest number of deaths in our jail per capita than any other county in California. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
First, this was a previous study now. I'm reading the report just as you, as anybody, this is not our result. We never compared anything outside San Diego. So what they said that if you compare how many people die in general population of county versus how many people die in their jail, and then look at this balance. That balance is worse in San Diego. These two deaths, in jail, there's too much deaths in jail versus how many deaths are in population. So that's what we're saying.
The reason I ask you that is because I asked for the other study, I asked for their methodology. So that I could better understand their figures or their numbers, but I never received that information. So I just wanted to be clear, because Los Angeles is right next to us and they are much larger, I believe. So I just want to make sure that's what the other people, you said that's what the other studies.
Right.
Okay, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. And there are studies, the two studies that were referenced prior are available on our website. At this point in time, how many people have requested to make public comment?
We have 2 online.
We have 7 requests to speak. And we will start with our
Okay, we'll go with 2 minutes then.
Okay. We will start with our in-person request to speak, and we will start with Yusuf Miller.
My goodness. Yusuf Miller, North County Equity and Justice Coalition, Saving Lives in Custody, California. Data, and the lack of data is all we've heard. And I should start off by thanking Mountain Woods for Life for the great attempt that you had to try to accumulate this data to give us something usable, but what has come back is not usable. Only thing it does is tells us what we've been saying for 6 years, the North County Equity and Justice Coalition, the Saving Lives in Custody campaign. If you were an impacted family, you can now feel some of the frustration that they have trying to get data on their loved ones. And they don't work for the county like you do. They're not hired and contracted like you guys are. These family members who are online and here in person have the same frustration of not getting these things. And you are basically compared to us on their team and you get nothing. 3 years we've been waiting for this report with 1 month worth of data. Taxpayers' dollars, and this is what we get. So frustrating. You should hear what the families online are saying as we're chatting in our chat rooms. You should hear what the impacted mother says over here as we're talking about the lack of data, lack of data, lack of data. We understand as people who are harmed by this lack of data, you can now at least see a glimpse into the lifestyle of people who are suffering while they're looking for data. And we have a solution for data. As we look into talking to the board of supervisors and supervisors to get an OIG, an inspector general in, to get access to the data that we are refused here on a local level. We have to kick it up a notch and get that information. And then that information, like the gentleman said here, I wrote your name down, I tried to pronounce it, Melachek, it said, without that pot of gold, we cannot properly analyze what's going on in San Diego County and get a proper picture so that we can fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Next, we will call Paloma Serna.
My name is Paloma Serna, the mother of Elisa Serna, who died in custody on November 11, 2019, Las Colinas, by medical neglect, and also by the deputies, Deputy Lacey Luisa, who still works at Las Colinas, and Deputy Tony Hall Bennett, who still works for the San Diego Sheriff, who now is in Vista Jail. And she was just involved in another in custody death. It's a shame that she is still, it's very shameful that these individuals are still working pattern of practice. And also too, I would like to answer Dawn. I have the answer for your question that you had just asked. Me and Yusuf, we attend also LA County and Riverside County. With their oversight board and with their board of supervisor meetings, they have the same problems with the sheriff giving them any type of data. We're always speaking with with them every month. They have the same problems. So so I'm sure that is happening throughout our nation. And so it's very difficult, like what Yusuf had just stated, it's very hard that we don't have answers. I really do appreciate all the recommendations, but in reality, we all know that it comes down to the employees, to the medical staff and the deputies. They don't give a crap about our loved ones at all. They don't see them as human beings at all. Look at the news article of Tony Hall Bennett, once again, she just ignored, this individual, same way how she walked away, closing the cell door, walking past Elisa's cell 5 to 6 times within that same hour that she died. They don't care. So you guys everyone could keep recommending until you guys start firing people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Serna.
Thank you. Now we will move on to our online request to speak, and we will start off with Daydream McLeod.
Thank you, CLERB, for commissioning this study. Despite the sheriff's obstinance about providing the data, I hope you are able to find something valuable in it at identifying when incarcerated people are most likely to die in our jails. And I hope this board will be bold and proactive in using the information to prevent in-custody deaths. As you move on to next steps, I ask that you go further than Mountain Whisper Light suggests for at least one recommendation, number 4. The study says that we should prioritize efforts to prevent deaths at Central and Vista. But leaving Las Colinas out of the conversation would do a disservice to the incarcerated women of San Diego. Men's deaths don't count more heavily than women's. The lost lives of Callan Lines, Linda Bagby, Viana Granillo, Elisa Serna, and Patricia Adamson shouldn't be pushed aside because more people died at Central and Vista. Make sure Las Colinas is part of any improvements suggested by this board going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Next, we will call David Myers.
I think he might have just stepped out.
Okay, we will. Oh,
he's there.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
All right, thank you. Good evening. My name is Dave Myers. I served 33 years in the San Diego Sheriff's Office. I retired as a commander. I'm here tonight to thank this board and to ask you to finish the work this report has started. The Mountain Whisper Light study you commissioned is the most rigorous outside examination of in-custody deaths the sheriff's office has ever faced. It confirmed what many of us have been saying for more than a decade. The researchers measured what I have argued for years: crowding kills, supervision saves lives. The numbers are now on the record. But here is what concerns me most. It took 14 months for the researchers to pry the data out of the sheriff's office. Many Public Records Act requests, a refused confidentiality agreement, specialty lawyers, and when they asked for the programs the sheriff says are preventing deaths, they got 40 website links and press releases. This is obstruction. 3 weeks ago, this board did something it has never done before in its history. You found that 2 deputies engaged in criminal conduct in connection with the death of Bobby Patton. You referred the case to the district attorney's office. That referral matters. It matters because Bobby Patton said, "Please help me," on a body camera, and a deputy switched the camera off and walked away. It matters because the sheriff office investigated and called it a failed safety check. So I'm asking this board 3 things. Demand that the sheriff's record release for investigative records under SB 519, not curated summaries. Ask publicly at the point in which Patton's case did not refer the matter to the homicide investigators for criminal investigations when one should have. Continue doing exactly what you did with the Patton referral. When the evidence shows criminal conduct, say something. And I'm glad to see Dustin Lopez in the audience. Dustin, you've been handed a key for a roadmap to end jail deaths. You own Pandora's box. Open it up. You have the data. I've seen it before. I know it's there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander.
Thank you. Next, we will call Leslie Crawford.
Yes, may I give my time to Yusuf Miller?
Yusuf Miller, same line of custody, California. And as I said before, for 6 years, we've been fighting and asking these same questions and complaining about these same issues. For example, we've complained about the high custody rate versus jail deaths. This is what prompted us to object to Prop 36, which does nothing more than increase the number of people who are in jail when we're still trying to fix an in-custody death issue. And more people will be coming into the jail system. Now, I must admit, Prop 36 has worked for me once, trying to get someone out of custody due to mental health issues, but it's flawed because there's not enough room for them to go to. So that they have to stay in custody anyway. If there's no room for them to go, we have to move heaven and earth just to get that person into a program. We also talked about the high overdoses. At Central Jail, for example, as an example, at Central Jail, the deputies go in and out through all kinds of, through the Sally Port, through other doors. People come in with Grubhub and all these kind of things. And we're talking about the drugs that people die within 1 to 2 weeks is very concerning. And here we are watching a system that is flawed and porous, where people can go through in and out and not be scanned like the regular population. Now, who's to say Grubhub isn't delivering XYZ? Or DoorDash is not delivering XYZ, or a deputy for that matter. None of us are excluded from this, or a deputy for that matter, walking with a bag of XYZ, just going through the Saudi port, not through a scan, not through dogs, or not through anything. So we've been asking these questions for 6 years. And then here we are with this report again, costing all these taxpayers money, and we get no data, nothing to satisfy us. And all the families that are sitting and waiting are sitting frustrated, as frustrated as you are, more so. So this is an issue that we've been dealing with, and hope out of that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next, we will call Darwin. Darwin, can you unmute?
Good evening. Thank you. I'm back. Darwin Fishman, he, him, his, Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego. And I just want to echo and support what other folks have said. What I really want to highlight is this is on CLERB. If obviously as people have been alluding to, the amount of time it took for this work to be done and the stonewalling from the sheriff's department. And so I would humbly suggest to you, Claire, that you work strategically with the supervisors. I don't think it's a done deal that you can't get access to this. I think on a certain level, it's a matter of how serious you are. And I understand a lot of references to legal counsel in letters that were sent back and forth. And that's obviously shouldn't be the case. It should start with a pot of gold. And you gotta, what I would again suggest to the supervisors when you're going through this is if you want CLERB to do its job, and if the supervisors, by extension the elected officials of San Diego, want the civilian oversight of the county to work well, then give us access to this data and information. If the sheriff is doing the job well, there should be no reason to hide the data. The point is that if you get access to the data, it will improve it. I say all that because it's not a stretch if you follow that basic logic that there are things that supervisors can do. How about the sheriff's budget is dependent on getting access to that data for this? How about you cut funding by 50% if they don't provide it? It should not take that to get access to it because it should be a win-win. How about you tell the supervisors, we'll save you $50 million in a budget that you pay out to impacted family members, or $100 million, depending on how it's going to go up this year. There's a lot of concrete reasons why this report should have been done in a way that you had access to all the data and that can help to empower CLERB you in your work, as well as ultimately help the county of San Diego. It should have been win-win, and it's horrifying to hear these reports and stories about the process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next, we will call John Settles. John, can you unmute?
Hi. Yes, I have. You can hear me?
Yes.
Great. I think I'd like to just give my time to Yusef Miller, who's always an eloquent speaker. Thank you for everyone who was involved in that study.
Thank you, Yusef Miller, Saving Lives in Custody, California. And for Mountain Whisper Life who's listening in, those people who are giving me their time are impacted families who have lost loved ones. We're all on one team. So I want to go now back to cause of death. Let's say cause of death. We've been talking about the study with cause of death, manner of death. Cause of death being, let's say, for example, a heart attack. Of course, Mountain Whisper Life doesn't have the data that they need to make a proper determination, but we do because we have the families and we know that there are heart attacks with patients who did not get their proper regimen of medication and they died. Let's say, for example, diabetes. We know, for example, you didn't get the data, but we know from the families that there are people who had their insulin pump run out and complained for days to get their insulin, and the insulin did not come. Even when the family brought the insulin to the jail, they did not take it. They had to reject it. I understand why, but they had to reject it, and that person died from insulin insufficiency. We have people, for example, someone has seizure medication, but they're not getting their seizure medication, and they seize off the third bump or the second bump or whatever. So there are, when we talk about manner of death coming off as natural, what processes led to that death is what we need to know. What dereliction of duty, what incompassionate medication dispersal of mental health watches, all those kind of things that are supposed to go on before leading up to a natural death. Were those things done? I think that needs to be broken out and needs to be explained in those data. Now, whether that data only goes to the clerk, somebody needs to know. And whether it goes to the investigators, somebody needs to know. If it goes to the OIG, someone needs to know that people are dying from these neglects, which are part of their constitutional right, state and national, to be taken care of as equal protection of the law and equal protection for a incarcerated person.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next, we will call Beverly Allinger.
Yes, I'd like to give my minutes as well to Yusef Miller. Thank you.
Yusef Miller, Saving Lives in Custody, California. In terms of mental health, the proper classification of people with mental health is another thing that should be studied. And especially when it comes to the cause of death, where we have people with severe mental health issues put with people with minor mental health issues and one kills the other. This misclassification is deadly. And it can happen again. Just now, we're hearing about a lawsuit of a person with autism. and that person was repeatedly raped, according to the lawsuit, at the Vista Detention Center. And we know at all our jails we have the PREA, Prison Rape Elimination Act, that is supposed to be going on. That program is already there. But what happened? The question is, what happened? This person has autism. It also crosses the line with ADA, Americans with Disability Act. Was that person properly classified and put in the right area to prevent this type of abuse from an inmate? When a person passes away in a hospital facility where we got unknown, when the person passes away in a hospital facility, if that event happened in the facility that caused them to pass away at a hospital or clinic or wherever, we should be tracking that. If the event that caused them to go to the hospital happened in, so for example, a stabbing, a beating, a trip and fall, anything, medication malfeasance, anything that happened in the jail that goes to the outside, so we should never have an unknown. And we should keep unknowns as small as possible, but particularly in these compassionate releases, and when people are going to the hospital, we have an unknown because it's out of our jurisdiction, but we had a person who fell and he harmed himself. He got hurt really bad when he fell. He went to the hospital. Later, he died, but he fell in the jail, and he should have had ADA protection in the jail. There are people who had seizures who cracked their skull open and later died in the jail. In the hospital.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That concludes our online request to speak. We have one written statement, Vice Chair. May I read? The statement is from Deborah Kamens, and it states, because the Sheriff's Office limited the data available for the in-custody death study, the CLERB should not accept its claims of reform without verification. Please demand a public recommendation by recommendation response showing what changed, when it changed, what data supports it, and how it can be independently verified. So reform can be verified and not merely assumed. That concludes the statement. Vice Chair, that concludes our request to speak for agenda item number 5.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to agenda item number 6. That's Executive Officer Brett Kalina's report.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Brett Kalina, and I'm the Executive Officer of CLERB. My pronouns are he, him, his. Update on staff, we hired another investigator who started on Monday. Matt Brown has lived and worked in San Diego County for 35 plus years, moving here from Minnesota, where he was raised. Following a 24-year career with the FBI, Matt transitioned to the role of Homeland Security Program Manager and Emergency Manager with the San Diego Port District, where he was embedded in the San Diego Harbor Police Department, also overseeing that department's crime analysis and intelligence programs. And following his work with the Port District, Matt moved to a director role with the Anti-Defamation League, which is a nonprofit civil rights organization overseeing incident response and law enforcement liaison focused on hate crimes and violent extremism. Priorities for us. We have now 3 cases that have been assigned to our healthcare experts, and we have been working with them, and we hope to be able to get the first one to you early this fall. From that, we're working on that process. Follow up from the annual report that was accepted by the Board of Supervisors on April 21st. And update on the juvenile probation. As you may have seen from the attachment, we've had some back and forth with the probation department regarding our interview questionnaires and a request for 8847 records. We really appreciate the probation department returning some of those questionnaires. We call them perps for our probation officers, but we're still waiting for personnel records. With that, we are planning to present the first 15 juvenile probation cases that came to us on the basis of GDI at next month's meeting. So we'll have the 15 then. However, we may not be able to provide final findings on those because we still need approval from the juvenile court in order to document any of those. And so we're waiting on that. It's in front of the judge now. And so we hope to have an answer by the June meeting, but it may not happen. But because Pole bar issues, we want to make sure we get it done in June because August is when pole bar comes up in those cases. You will note next attachment documenting CLERB's outreach opportunities. If you had a chance to take a look at that, our outreach specialist, Leslie, who's been here working the meeting tonight. Thanks to her for doing our first press release in a real long time. And we're expected to continue our outreach abilities through those events, social media, and additional press releases. You and the public may start seeing some slight changes in the wording of our allegations, especially a term like serious misconduct. In some instances, we also expect to have a few changes in our redacted findings with the addition of our medical review. We're still trying to determine the best and safest way to keep confidential information through our medical review as well. I wanted to give a brief explanation. Recently, we've had some questions about why are some officers' names put in the redacted in the draft agenda, and sometimes they're not, and then why do we have it sometimes in the redacted findings as well? So just to inform everyone in the board that CLERB staff follows 832.7 of the Penal Code, which is part of the Peace Officer Bill of Rights, which determines that civil oversight boards can announce the names of deputies in our recommended findings only in two types of cases. So those are any incident involving the discharge of a firearm and any incident involving the use of force resulting in great bodily injury. So those are going to be the only times you're going to see a deputy's name in our redacted recommended findings. Now, what happens after that? If CLERB is allowed to place the name of the officer in the final findings only upon this board's sustained finding on the following 5 cases: failure to intervene, sexual assault, dishonesty in regard to reporting, discrimination, and unlawful arrest or search. Which is why you may see sometimes a sustained finding for a procedure that does not fall within these categories, and therefore you will not see the officer's name in our redacted reports. I wanted to thank the entire CLERB staff came out yesterday to attend the 40th Annual Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, which was held right out in the front here. It was a really nice ceremony on the west side of the building at the memorial wall. And if you haven't been here, it's right out in the front, just north of the fountain. And goes without saying, as La Mesa PD suffered the loss of one of their officers this last year. Her name is Lauren Craven. She was just stopping to assist motorists following an accident after she had dropped someone off at a detention center. It goes without saying that there's a reminder that our law enforcement officers, including our officers in here today and the ones that are out in our hallway and the ones that are doing our security here, put themselves in danger every day to protect the communities that they serve. Yesterday, we also went to the Commission on Police Practices meeting last night because there was a presentation by POST, which is the Police Officer Standards and Training groups. There gave a presentation on their entire process of what they do and why they do it in regards to the complaint process. And so I think it was a really enlightening presentation. I will be able to get that PowerPoint presentation to you all at some point in time. They agreed to provide that to me. And hopefully we can get them here someday in front of you as well. Also, the video, just like our videos go online, should be up fairly soon, and you can go and watch their presentation as well, see the questions, see the responses. For case updates, we had 2 deaths in the last month, 1 compassionate release, and 1 officer-involved shooting, and just 1 GBI case from the sheriff's department. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Kalina. Next is the item 7, which is the board chair's report. I'm going to read you the items that Chair Mary Ann Pinter asked me to read. She said, "I'm sorry I couldn't be here tonight. I'm away on required work travel." She goes on to say that she did submitted questions, and then I read to you before her comments about Mountain Whisper Light. She also said, "I want to extend special gratitude to Norris Aycock, our CLERB deputy chief, who really spent a lot of time trying to help the Mountain Whisper Light team get the information they were seeking from the sheriff's office and administering this contract. Much of this she did during the months when CLERB was without an executive officer, and she was taking on a lot of additional work. I know it was a lot to manage, and she could be commended." Mary Ann went on to say, "Finally, I want to thank our former CLERB board member and secretary, Bonnie King, who made the motion to seek this depth study following results from the Analytica study, which was really about the numbers and less about why. The board at that time made this commitment and approved the funds that led to this important work. And I would also acknowledge the great job that Norris did. She was the COR, I guess, contracting officer representative, and obviously put in a whole lot of work on that study. Going on to the next item there, it's going to be the number 8, board member query of sheriff probation and liaison officers. But before I call Lieutenant Judge up here, I've been notified that either Assistant Sheriff Lopez or Commander Johns or somebody else who's present and wants to make a comment, and we certainly want to, and we certainly want to appreciate you all being here. I think it really facilitates the information chain. So please proceed.
Thank you, sir. Just to introduce myself, I'm Assistant Sheriff Dustin Lopez. I oversee the Detention Service Bureau of the entirety. I just want to respond to Mountain Whisper Light report just real quickly, because I think the narrative is we were not producing data. Excuse me. I just want the public to understand that there's certain information that's protected by state and federal law that we're not allowed to release. As I tell the public sometimes, I don't make the laws, we just enforce the laws. So the information that was not provided was protected by law, and that's obviously personal medical data, booking information charges, and mental health history and stuff like that, and so forth. So when we're saying we're not releasing the data, that data is protected by law, and I want everybody to notice that. We're trying to be, as an office, as transparent as possible. I have to be honest with you, to the level of transparency, I was kind of looking forward to this report, because any data that we can receive and implement helps our office too. And we always say, any preventable death is not acceptable, period. So we look into that data and try to figure out why this is occurring. I will also want to say that this report went out to 2024. I will say there's substantial changes since 2024. I know this narrative, and I continue hearing this narrative since I took over this job, was we have the highest death rate of any jail in the state of California. That's not true. And anybody can do the research. The research is online. That is not correct. But no death is acceptable, correct? And lastly, I just want to say, as far as the CPR requests, and as far as the protection under state and federal law, if you look at that report acutely, there was 6 other offices that had CPR requests sent to them that were not filled. And I'm assuming, not just the sheriff's office, which is not pointed out, but it's in the report, and I'm assuming that some of that information was protected by state and federal law. That's why the CPR requests were not filled. So I just want to thank everybody for hearing me. And just like I said, any data that can be given to us is pertinent, and we will implement it as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Sheriff Lopez. Did Commander Johns want to say something? No? Okay, well, Lieutenant Jurek, come on back up front, if you would, please. Or come up front. This is now the board member's query for the sheriff liaison. And I know that you did provide us a report. I hope all the board members have seen it. Do you have anything else to add before I open up to board member questions? No, sir. Board members. Hearing none, thank you very much. Thank you here and for the information you provided. You're welcome. Next, we're going to invite probation. I believe we have Anna Diaz from probation to come up front. You have anything to report, ma'am?
Yes, I do. There was a question last session. I wasn't here, but it was given to my colleague, and the question was if we test the female youth that come into custody, pregnancy test? And the answer is yes. I'm not sure who asked it, but that's the answer.
You want to follow up on that? Any board member comments, questions? If not, thank you very much for being here, and we're now going to go to the next item, which is going to be new business. And that's, we have CLERB Special Investigator Adam Nolan here, and he's going to give us a presentation on something that we certainly a very key issue, and that's the intercom policy. Adam.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mendelson and board members. So my name is Adam Nolan, those of you who know me. I'm one of CLERB's 7 special investigators assigned to staff. I'm going to provide you a very brief overview on intercoms. It's already been a long meeting, so I'll get through this as quickly as I can. But it is something that investigators frequently encounter in our investigations. And it's something that board members frequently have questions on with regard. So we thought it was time to provide this presentation for you and give you some of this data. You can go to the next slide. So there's 4 things today that I'm really going to talk to you about. The first is some identified concerns and issues that investigators have found with regard to the intercoms. The second is going to be the policy that San Diego Sheriff's Department utilizes with regard to intercoms. The third is going to be some policy and research, which our research and data analyst, Kelsey Downs, did for us. Did some really extensive research for us. And I think that part is going to be kind of enlightening. We were surprised at what we found, and more importantly, what we didn't find in that research. And then lastly, some policy recommendations. You all have the written policy recommendations from us in front of you or in the board packet, but I will touch base on those as well in this presentation. And then at the end, if you have any questions, either myself or the senior staff should be able to help you answer those. Next slide. So issues and concerns. There's really 2 issues, and they really revolve around the same thing. And that is repeated allegations that come up in our cases of a failure of deputies to respond to intercom activations. And it can come in 2 forms. It could be either just a flat out nobody responded, or we'll get an allegation potentially that intercom was silenced or muted in the control station. And that's kind of a semantics issue. I think the Sheriff's Department has said that those systems cannot be muted. However, there is volume control, so they can be turned down, probably low enough to where they can't be heard. So those are some of the issues that we've identified. And then some of the concerns that have come up for us are, in our cases, it is very common for us to get an IP or a complainant who says, press the intercom multiple times and nobody showed up from the Sheriff's Department. And then when we do our investigation, oftentimes it's a year, even longer after. So we could have 200 shifts for these deputies that passed. And now the investigator is asking that deputy that was working that shift in that spot that day, do you recall getting an activation or a notification from this and you can imagine how difficult that would be. I know for myself in law enforcement, it's very difficult to recall things in court years later when the mask came out. So that is something for us. It's very difficult in our investigations to kind of determine the veracity of statements that we're getting. Because what we'll get is, yes, we press the intercom, and typically the answer we get from deputies, which makes sense, is I don't recall getting any notification from the cell during the shift. And then lastly, this one is anecdotal, but we think it's important because, like most of you, all of the investigators have done tours of all of the jail facilities. In many instances, we've repeatedly gone over to the same jail facility. And while we're looking at the facility itself, and we're looking at the facility, one of the things that we do is it provides us an opportunity to have a very informal conversation with the line deputies that are actually working in those jails. And kind of identify what works for them, what are the concerns that they have, what are the obstacles that they deal with. And it's really been nice for the investigators because the deputies are very candid with us in their response because it's an informal setting. And anecdotally, because nobody keeps data on how many activations of intercoms that there are, there's a lot. And what we found from deputies is that the intercoms are used quite a bit. And I'll go over shortly the policy for them. But I think as we sit here, it would be easy to think, someone presses the intercom, you got to answer. But in talking with these deputies, I think the amount of activations of these intercoms is very significant, probably more so than any of us thought. Next slide. So the intercoms themselves, where are they located? They're located in the day rooms and the cells. The day rooms, when you see our CCTV footage, what you see typically are a module that has 2 tiers of cells, and then in front of the module will be an area with tables, phones, TV. That's the day room. So you'll find one of these intercoms in that modular day room area, and then you'll also find one in each of the cells. And how they function is they're very simple. It's a little metal box that has a speaker and a button. You want to use it, you press the button, and you start talking directly to the deputies in the control tower. The primary purpose of these intercoms is for emergency communications. It could be something medical, I'm having chest pain, I can't breathe, whatever. Or it could be something safety related. I'm worried about my cellmate, or there's somebody out in the day room that I'm concerned about. It's essentially a way for them to communicate with deputies in a non-face-to-face way.
There we go.
Intercom. House 5, how can I help you? All right, I'll send deputies and a medical team. All right. Need medics, deputies, Chuck 110. Dad, I don't feel good. I have chest pains. How can I help you?
Hey, Dep, I need an image request and some toilet paper.
All right, my deputy will be walking here shortly. I'll make sure he gets it to you, all right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. How can I help you?
Hey, Dep, I need an image request and some toilet paper.
All right, my deputy will be walking here shortly. I'll make sure he gets it to you, all right?
Thank you.
So that's 2 very different communications you'll gather. You can see the 2 different systems. One is this is probably an older system. But in the first one you have is medical emergency. In the second one, the IP is asking for paperwork and toilet paper, basically. And that kind of plays into the recommendations we get further in these. Even next time.
We're frozen again.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Okay, well, I think I can do it without the presentation.
It'll be there.
There we go. So with regard to the San Diego Sheriff Department, their policy, this is a policy that investigators deal with frequently. It's one that we routinely review when we're going to do our investigations. It falls under Detention Services Bureau IDA.2, and it basically says the primary use for the intercom is summoning emergency assistance. It prohibits routine muting. However, if it is muted, it requires documentation by the deputy as to why. It requires sworn staff at the beginning of their shifts to ensure that the volume is turned up to a level that they know they can hear it before the shift starts. It requires all staff to answer all intercom calls expeditiously and follow up. And it requires sworn staff to ensure the intercoms are kept clear of obstructions. So what you commonly see when deputies are doing their cell inspections is they'll step into the cell, and amongst the other things they're doing, they themselves will press the intercom button to ensure that there's actual communication between the cell and the control deputy. And lastly, it requires sworn staff to make a notification if that intercom isn't working. So the research. One of the things that was kind of surprising is that there's no national standard when it comes to intercom, no California standard. Title 15 doesn't mention anything about intercoms. And so we figured, how do we figure out where we think San Diego sheriffs stack up with the rest of at least the state? So we took a look at all 58 counties in the state. And what we found, it's very hard to decipher policy sometimes, but we can confidently say there's really 10 agencies that have systems designed for direct communication between IPs and deputies. Nearly every county facility or every county in the state has intercom systems, but the vast majority of them are just designed for deputy to deputy communication, especially for deputies that are working in close proximity to IPs. So really only 10 in the county actually have a system capable of this. And then looking at policies, what we did find is that San Diego Sheriff's Department has one of the most comprehensive policies with regard to intercom usage. Having said that, in looking at these other policies, we did find a couple other agencies that have some intriguing points to their policy that we thought might be good for us to take a look at and maybe look at putting into a recommendation for the San Diego Sheriff's Department. And one came from San Bernardino County. And what they essentially require is on any intercom activation, the deputies are required to look up the medical information of the IPs in that cell and make a notification to the medical staff. They do that because that intercom solely is not it's not primarily for emergency communications. It is solely for emergency communications. So when that intercom is activated, that's the default response level. This is an emergency. And then we found in Sutter County, they also use it as an emergency only. They actually took a step to identify non-emergency use of the intercom by IPs as a rules violation. And one of the things that they cited in the policy is that it's important, that they've deemed that it's important to respond to all of these intercom activations. But they want to make sure that these intercom activations are emergency. So if they get one that's not an emergency, they will actually respond, but then they'll hold those IPs accountable for utilizing the intercom system in a fashion that's not. One of the other things that was very enlightening for us is there's some agencies very large to the north of us that don't have any kind of system like this. They rely solely on face-to-face communication between the deputies and IPs. So recommendations. We really came down with 4 recommendations for you to take a look at. The first one is with regard to intercom logs. I mentioned that they have a newer system that actually logs the intercom notifications. It doesn't tell you what took place, but it does tell you a date and time that that activation took place. And so what we're recommending is the Sheriff's Department adopts a policy that requires the Sheriff's Department to take the preceding 24 hours of an IP's death and automatically pull that information for us for our investigation. The second one is with regard to activations as well. This is for those systems that don't have that logging capability. And that is to adopt a policy and a corresponding procedure for deputies that document these intercom activations that are taking place. I don't know what that's going to look like. I spent the majority of my career doing policy-like things. Policy is easy to recommend. It's easy to formulate. It is very difficult to implement, especially when you have an organization that is doing this 24/7. So I don't know what that looked like. I don't know if it's the deputy taking manual notes. I don't know if it's them putting it in gyms, but we do recommend that they do come up with a system that logs those activations, mostly because it'll give us an opportunity to have some kind of tangible evidence one way or the other with regard to intercom allegations. The third one is with regard to sworn staff's responsibilities. The sheriff's policy does say that they will respond and follow up, but it's more of a general policy as opposed to a very specific policy on outlining what deputies will do, say in San Bernardino County, where they're required to make notification to medical staff and pull records. What we are recommending is the Sheriff's Department comes up with a policy and a procedure of what deputies are actually supposed to do. Are those intercom responses, are they in person? Are they not in person? And it goes hand in hand with our last recommendation, and that is, it's called misuse here, but I guess I'll just call it use because I think it's in use so frequently. And that is a recommendation to the Sheriff's Department to develop something similar to what Sutter County has. And that is a actual rules violation for the IPs and to mandate that that intercom system is used for emergencies only. And that would require, first off, identifying what an emergency is. the IPs need to know what are the parameters of an emergency. So that has to be established, with deputies. And then once you establish what an emergency is, then you can outline the responsibilities of deputies and or IPs at that point. And really that's it. We're just recommending those things for you. That is all I have unless you need to have questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that thorough investigation and report. Yeah, and the only comment I have before I open up to other board members is that there's probably 500,000 flights airborne every day that have recordings of everything that's said. Now, obviously, you're not going to go retrofit the jails. However, Vista, from my understanding, they're looking at putting a new jail in there. So I would hope that perhaps they could have some sort of system that when we did have an incident, there would be a recording that we could go get of everything that transpired with high quality, much like all the ring cameras that everybody had. But having said that, I'll open it up. I think before I open it up to board comment, does anybody on the sheriff's leadership team wish to address us back there? You don't have to, just give me opportunity.
Commander Chris Lawrence and Commander Destin Johns. We'll be available for questions as well if you have any. We'd be more than happy to do that. But thank you for the study that was done. The intercoms, some of the suggestions that were made would be difficult to employ without a complete culture change within the facility for the IPs. As you hear, that is a common request for non-emergencies. That's the way that they can communicate with deputies between the hourly checks or less if they do occur. But it's definitely something we'll take a look at. Those are some good suggestions. We'll look at the other counties that do employ some of those stricter policies. We'll see how we can make recommendations around that as well. But I do like the fact that you pointed out as well, we are one of few that employ that system and it's best practices. We found that it's helped out a lot. We took steps to make that happen without the state or federal mandates.
Thank you, sir.
I think the only thing that I would add would be into response to the San Bernardino findings of sworn staff looking at medical information. Our medical electronic health record is bifurcated from our gym system, so deputies don't have access to any of the specific medical conditions that an incarcerated person would have. So our deputies, if they are alerted to a medical emergency, they're using signs and symptoms, heart rate, unconscious, things that they can see and that they can identify physically, not necessarily from a medical standpoint.
Thank you. Board members' comments or questions? Yes, Mr. Bisson.
Just one question, Mr. Nolan, that was awesome. Thank you for that research and et cetera. You said Sutter County has some facility discipline that they mete out when there's abuse of the system. What exactly would that discipline look like?
I honestly don't know. The San Diego Sheriff's Department also has inmate rules, so they would probably be better positioned to answer that question for you.
Well, we don't enforce any rules in regards to intercom use, but our range of violations or discipline regarding violations can go from social visits being missed for a week or all the way up to day room restrictions, so up to 10 days. So it would vary in there based on the severity of the rule violation. I would assume that if we did implement something like that, the misuse of intercoms would be a very minor violation. And I think it'd be more of just getting the incarcerated population used to the fact that they're not supposed to be using it for simple items like toilet paper requests or things of that nature. So I think it will be a culture change, but it would never be a severe loss of 10 days of day room access for something like that. I would hope not.
Yeah, that would be pretty severe, but it was just interesting that in Sutter County they have something in place. I would be very interested to learn what that is.
So I can jump in there. They had levels of violations. I would assume we match somewhere similar to yours in that it was the lowest level of a violation. It would take repeated violations to get to the next level. And so I would assume that would be something very similar to what was already in place with their rule violations.
Yeah, I also agree with Jim. It'd be nice if there was some recording. I don't know if anybody does that in the counties in the state or state corrections anywhere. But another question is there's two activations at the same time with the deputy notice.
Yes. So with the new system and the old system, both of them, they have independent audible alarms. So if there's one activation, like in the old system that you saw in this facility, the deputy would be able to speak on that one, and then another activation would set off the same audible alarm, and then it would just keep beeping until he was able to respond to that. And that would go for the same new digital touchscreen system as well. So there's no override passes.
The other question was, is there any record in our either one of our systems where when activated, the date, time, and the cell was recorded? And if we don't have that, does anybody have that in the state? Which you have date, time, and the cell.
The sheriff's department does have a newer system that's online. It does, I believe, record date and times of applications.
We do, yes. It's limited to one facility, I believe, at this time. The Vista one does not. It's a very old system. The county thankfully did just approve a retrofit for the security system at the Vista Detention Facility at Tool. The new facility is built, and the one that's being put in place will have that capabilities.
Thank you.
This is Dr. Brown.
Yeah. My question is, you see, once it's activated, it continues to beep until someone turns it off, right?
That is correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that. The one thing I was, but then how can someone? That's something I'll talk about it. I'm trying to figure out something. Thank you. That's all.
Ms. Margin.
Thank you. For the recommendations, maybe, personally, like, I don't like the idea, like, having some sort of like consequence. Like, is there an opportunity to rather have like some sort of like ambassador or like to address the culture from the IPs to understand really the importance of the intercoms communications in emergencies? I just don't know if like having consequences would be the best approach. Like how, I'm just asking, like, are there other ways to have buy-in so that they can use these communication systems in a more responsible way? And, you know, toilet paper, like you say toilet paper, but maybe that is an emergency. So just, you know, just thinking about that in a different manner versus just adding more stress.
I think with recommendations, I mean, that's a very, very big point. Most policy, or should I say effective policies, are multifaceted. And so, I would not rule out that a rules violation wouldn't be appropriate, but, it would probably be very appropriate for that to be done in conjunction with things like you're speaking with. There's definitely more ways to skin that. Sure, this is just one.
Thank you.
Ms. Fasano.
My question is, are we going to get, is the board going to get a written report on the review of intercom systems?
I believe you already have, at least our policy recommendations.
I've been informed that it's in the box. Unfortunately, I'm unable to find it in box. How many board members have seen it in box? So I'm gonna recommend that we table this till next month, but I'm gonna ask each of the board members to review it. And also I'll ask Amanda to make sure that we can all get to it. It's probably there, we just can't find it, but we can do it and we should be able to act on the policy recommendation next month.
And I just wanted to confirm that part of the report actually documents by facility what kinds of systems are in place in the jail.
I don't believe it actually documents the specific facilities. But like the commander said, I think there's only one facility currently. Is it something? Or that is a newer one?
It would be George Bailey.
George Bailey.
My request.
We're just, you know, Lieutenant Judge Jarrett did already provide this information to the board, probably a couple of months ago, and there was written questions that he responded to, and that the newer VCIS systems are at Las Colinas, George Bailey, and Rock Mountain. And those three facilities would be able to document.
All right, at this time, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Thompson.
Yeah, just one quick question. So the intercoms will pretty much limit private conversations, I would assume. And you said that some of these other facilities that don't, outside of San Diego, who don't have this intercom system are doing more face-to-face. Which one do you prefer? Which one do you think does better for taking care of these events?
That's a great question. I think there's pros and cons to both. The purpose of the intercoms is for the immediate access to the deputies to call for an emergency. If you have to wait for a deputy to walk by a cell during a security check or any other work that they're doing on the floor, you would have to wait or make some sort of movement or noise, banging on the cell, and a ruckus to be noticed. So there are challenges, though. However, if there's anyone else in the tower at the time that you're communicating with the deputy, or you have a cellmate, it would be difficult to have a private conversation if one needed to be done. However, I think there's ways that we as humans could at least call for attention, get a deputy in person if you really needed to relay information that need to be addressed privately.
And I think we're thinking about communication from one way of traffic right now. It's a tool for our deputies to be able to prep incarcerated people for court, transfer, ask them if they want to see their attorney, if there's a professional visit or a social visit. So there's a lot of communication that we are able to execute going to the incarcerated person that can happen a lot faster than a deputy having to stop what he's doing and then go ask the question in person. So I think it's a more efficient mode of communication, certainly to have this cell intercoms with them.
Thank you. Madam Moderator, have we had any speaker requests?
We have one request to speak online.
If we just have one, we'll give them 2 minutes.
Hello?
Leslie? Yes.
Yes, can I give my minutes to Yusuf Miller, please?
Yes.
Yes.
You said Miller State Reliance Custody, California, and since we're talking about the intercoms and the lovely person that gave me the time to speak for her, when her son lost his life, he was trying to get a hold of someone on the intercom, and the people did not respond in time after he was injured pretty severely. And we know from the report, and as Assistant Sheriff Lopez rightly said, at the time of that report, that was years ago when we were the highest in custody death rate at the time. And when we had the report talking about the number of intercoms that weren't working and weren't serviceable. And that has been something that the Sheriff's Department has claimed to be working on. I don't know the status of it. Maybe they have reported it. I can't think of it off the top of my head at the moment. But there has been instances of family members with intercoms either not working or not being responded to. And we have that as anecdotal evidence. But where it sits now, I'm not able to speak on it. But it was a factor that caused the loss of life of Brandon Yates, and it was another for Raymond Bowman, and so on. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. We have another request to speak online from John Settles.
Did it just come in or was it previously sent?
It just came in. Raise hand.
1 minute.
John, can you unmute? John,
Hi
can you
there.
hear us? Yes.
Yeah, sorry, it wasn't letting me unmute. I was just going to give my time to Youssef, but it seemed like he truncated his response. It's up to him.
Sure.
But thank you all.
Yusef Miller, Stabilized in Hudson, California. And the recommendation for holding the intercom information and data for 24 hours before 24 hours prior to the person's death is really important. We've had issues where there's not really a rule on how long you keep it as from the best of my knowledge. And I think that those preceding times when they're deleted, it makes it hard to litigate and find out what actually happened. So we've had that experience as well, where the intercom information either was not taken down or was deleted, and it would have been really useful on finding out what happened to the loved one of one of our loved ones. So I think it should be more than 24 hours, the day prior, but sometimes it's a series of events, series of things, 72 hours or something like that, but it needs to be preserved from that time forward.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vice Chair. That concludes our request to speak for agenda item number 9.
We're going to item 10. We have no unfinished business. We now go to item 11. Do any board members have any comments they wish to make at this time?
I'd just like to reiterate, if you don't mind.
Yes, Dr. Brown.
I'd like to re-emphasize the need for us to really take a look at all the trauma that exists, how much people are being traumatized. I know in the jails, deputies, trauma, somehow we need to get try to better understand that as an issue. Now you're back. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Hearing no other board member comments, I'm going to ask our counsel if she would read us into closed session at this time.
Yes, good afternoon, good evening, Vice Chair, Commissioners, and members of the public. Item 12 of tonight's agenda, closed session. 12A is public employee discipline, dismissal, release pursuant to Government Code Section 54957. And for this evening's closed session, we have 15 cases for summary dismissal. For summary hearing, and that concludes my reading. Sorry.
Thank you. At this time, we'll adjourn our open session. The time is 8:48. We will reconvene in 10 minutes at 8:58 for our closed session.